Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The God of Ice and Fire at Hogwarts. Chapter 41. Hermione asked in disbelief. Arina, where did you get the catnip? Arina stuck out her tongue, leaned into Hermione's ear and said, when I was studying at home during the summer vacation, I heard that there is a profound transformation technique called animagus, which can turn wizards into small animals. The animagus we have registered with the Ministry of Magic in the UK includes Professor McGonagall, who can turn into a cat. Irina's breath hit Hermione's earlobe, making her face blush slightly. But after hearing Irina's words, Hermione looked even more incredulous. So you knew that the tabby cat was Professor McGonagall, and then you still did this? As a good baby, Hermione couldn't even imagine what Arina did. Arina chuckled. Oh, who can resist a cute cat, Dean? Hermione couldn't help but roll her eyes. Oh, Merlin's lace stockings. Just when Hermione wanted to continue saying something, she seemed to see something terrifying and she immediately stopped talking. But Arina didn't notice it at all. She continued, if Professor McGonagall hadn't changed back too quickly, I would have prepared cat strips and cat teasing sticks. Just when Arina was talking enthusiastically, a hand was placed on her shoulder. This made Arina freeze on the spot, and her head turned back one by one. Oh, could you please, Miss Lowell, and show me your cat strips and cat teasers? Professor McGonagall looked at her with a half smile, and her clenched right hand showed her inner anger. After taking a look at the helpless expression on Hermione's face, Arina forced a smile. Professor, do you believe me when I say you heard me wrong? Professor McGonagall's eyes were sharp. Do you think I believe it or not? Facing Professor McGonagall's gaze that seemed to want to kill someone, Arina resisted the urge to say, yes, I guess you believe it or not, and lowered her head. Just as the classroom fell into deathly silence, two boys broke into the classroom rashly and rescued Arina. With her head lowered, Arina glanced at Professor McGonagall, who turned and walked towards the door of the classroom with her peripheral vision, and finally let out a sigh of relief. Thank you, Harry and Ron. At this moment, Harry and Ron saw that they were caught late and immediately stood there, waiting for Professor McGonagall to lecture them. Maybe I should turn Mr. Potter and Mr. Weasley into a pocket watch, so at least one of you two keeps time. Professor McGonagall said to the two of them seriously. Harry argued, Professor, we're lost. Professor McGonagall said noncommittally, then it becomes a map. You don't need a map to find your own seat, right? After saying that, Professor McGonagall asked the two of them to return to their seats. Arina carefully looked up at the people and said in a voice that even she could not hear, we never use transformation spells to punish students. At this time, Arina, stay after class. Professor McGonagall didn't look back. I'm done. Arina cried and fell into Hermione's arms, making Hermione's face flushed and at a loss. During the luncheon, Erwin Foley leaned over and whispered, did you hear that? The new student in Gryffindor named Lowell actually stuffed Professor McGonagall's animagus form. Catnip. I'm so envious. Ah, it's incredible. Lynn glanced at him and said, are you a Hufflepuff? Since when did you like eating melons so much? Although Lynn was calm on the surface, there was a storm in his heart. Good guy, how dare you bring catnip to Professor McGonagall? He really doesn't dare to do this kind of work. So envious. Bah, so outrageous. However, is that Arina also a time traveler? Lynn thought suspiciously. He turned his head and glanced at the silver-haired girl on the Gryffindor table who was chatting and laughing with Hermione. The girl's delicate face and clear laughter attracted the Gryffindor boys around her to turn their heads. Attention. Lynn shook his head. Forget it, don't think about it anymore. Even if the person named Arina Lowell is also a time traveler, she doesn't pose much of a threat to him now. As far as this school year is concerned, his biggest threat is Voldemort behind Quirrell's head. Thinking of this, Lynn subconsciously glanced at Quirrell on the teacher's seat. This head of garlic was wrapped in a thick turban that smelled like an old woman's foot wrap. Could this Quillot be a double agent? It's admirable that Voldemort could stand the stench. Lynn complained in his mind. At 3:30 in the afternoon, it was the first flying lesson for Hogwarts freshmen. Arina, Hermione and other freshmen from Gryffindor and Slytherin hurriedly walked down the steps and came to the field in front of the door to prepare for their first flying lesson. At this time, most of the young wizards had already arrived. Harry and Ron were standing next to Arina and Hermione. The four of them had already gotten to know each other in the compartment of the Hogwarts Express. Ms. Hooch, the flying instructor, arrived, with short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk's. "Well, what are you all waiting for?" she snapped. "Everyone stand by a broomstick. Quick, quick, hurry up." Irina glanced at the broomsticks at everyone's feet. These broomsticks were old and broken, with some branches sticking out in random directions. She was afraid that these broomsticks would fall apart in midair. "Stretch out your right hand and place it on the broom handle," Ms. Hooch shouted from the front, "and then say, 'Get up.'" A group of little wizards shouted, "Get up." Irina subconsciously said, "Pigeon." Hermione on the side looked puzzled. What does it have to do with pigeons? Irina realized that she had shouted wrongly, and quickly shouted again, "Get up." The English word for get up is up. Irina will never admit that she thinks all ups are pigeons. When everyone made a sound, Harry's broom immediately jumped into his hand, while Hermione's broom just rolled on the ground, and Neville's broom didn't move at all. Although the broom at Irina's feet floated up a bit, it quickly fell back. But Irina, who was not a martial artist, actually kicked the broom at the base when it was falling back, causing the broom to spin around in the air before she caught it in her hand. Then Ms. Hooch showed them how to ride on a broom without falling off their heads. She walked around the group, correcting the hand grips of the little wizards. Soon, it was time for them to practice. "Okay, as soon as I whistle, you kick your legs off the ground and push hard," Ms. Huochi said. "Hold the broom steadily, rise a few feet, then lean forward slightly and fall vertically back to the ground. Hear my whistle. 3, 2, 1. But things didn't go as Ms. Huochi expected. Before the whistle blew, Neville, who was extremely nervous, subconsciously kicked off his broom and flew up into the sky. "Come back, boy," cried Ms. Hooch. Neville was seen rising straight up, like a cork being ejected from a bottle. His frightened, pale face looked down at the rapidly retreating ground. He gasped for air and slid down the side of the broom handle. Wingardium Leviosa. Irina, who foresaw the plot, quickly cast the levitating spell. Her spell was accurately applied to Neville, making him fall much slower. However, her talent in the levitating spell was not as powerful as the freezing spell. Although Neville's falling speed was slowed down, the degree of slowdown was not enough to prevent him from being injured. I saw Neville hit the grass with a bang, and his face turned pale in pain. Ms. Hooch leaned over and looked at Neville. Her face was as pale as Neville's. After a brief inspection, Ms. Huochi pulled Neville up. "It's okay, just his wrist is broken." She turned to look at the other little wizards on the field. "I'm taking this kid to the hospital. No one of you is allowed to move. Put the broomstick back where it belongs. Otherwise, you'll be kicked out of Hogwarts before you can even say, Quidditch," Huo said. Ms. Chi threatened. After Ms. Hooch left, Malfoy couldn't help but jump out. I saw him grabbing the memory ball that Neville accidentally dropped on the grass. "Look. That fool Longbottom's grandmother gave it to him." Malfoy raised the memory ball with a proud expression on his face. "Here, Malfoy," Harry said, pulling the wand from his belt. Seeing this, Irina slapped her forehead, and the famous scene was about to happen again. Malfoy said with a cruel smile, "I want to put it somewhere for Longbottom to pick it up. How about putting it on a tree, for example?" Hearing this, Harry shouted, "Bring it here." Before Harry could do anything, Malfoy jumped on a broomstick and was ready to take off. Malfoy is a seeker who can compete with Harry in the Quidditch match. He does have a skill in flying. He is suspended at a height parallel to the top of a rubber tree, heading towards Harry smiled mockingly. Seeing this, Harry also grabbed his broom and chased Malfoy one behind the other. "Stop it, Harry. Ms. Hooch will have you fired." Hermione on the side was anxious. "Who knows, family members. Even if she has one mother and 2 children, this baby named Harry is very naughty." "Don't worry, Hermione." Irina held her down and raised her wand with her other hand. Although she was happy to witness the famous scene of Deha falling in love and killing each other, Malfoy's behavior could be regarded as campus bullying, and Malfoy's bad attitude even made her unable to stand it. "Aha!" Irina flicked her wand, and an icy blue beam of light burst out from the top of the wand, breaking through the air and heading towards the broom under Malfoy. This silent freezing spell was very beautiful, but the tense chase in the air made everyone ignore Irina's silent casting. Snapped. There was an explosion of ice, and the broom under Malfoy was suddenly frozen into solid ice and fell downwards. The coolness coming from under his butt caused Malfoy to eject and then land under the influence of gravity. However, Malfoy didn't seem to want Harry to succeed easily. He threw the memory ball in his hand far away, then pulled out his wand and cast a flying spell at the memory ball. The memory ball was hit by the curse and flew out instantly, while Malfoy fell heavily to the ground and let out a wail. Seeing this, Harry quickly flew out. He chased the memory ball and flew over the castle in an instant, and then followed the memory ball down rapidly. Harry dived towards the grass and caught the memory ball almost on the ground. Seeing this scene, the little Gryffindor wizards cheered and surrounded Harry. But at this moment, an angry shout came. "Harry Potter!" Seeing Professor McGonagall running toward them angrily, Harry stood up from the ground, trembling all over. "In all my years at Hogwarts, I have never." Professor McGonagall was so surprised that she couldn't speak. The lenses of her glasses flashed with anger. "How dare you? You will break your neck." Quote. Soon, Professor McGonagall slipped Harry away. Hermione looked worried, and Arina was there to comfort her. Having read the original plot, she naturally knew that Harry would not be expelled, but instead became the seeker of the Gryffindor Quidditch team by a blessing in disguise. "Don't worry, Hermione, look, I'll be fine after I beat Malfoy down with the freezing curse." Arina patted Hermione's back and said with a smile. Hermione gave her a blank look, and said, "You were not seen by Professor McGonagall." At this time, Malfoy covered his swollen butt with one hand, but walked over with a very arrogant face. "Humph, your famous Harry Potter is about to be expelled from Hogwarts. You can only go back to the Muggle world in despair. You stupid fellows will have to be expelled from Hogwarts sooner or later." Malfoy said. He looked at Arina. "And you mudblood, you dare to sneak attack on me. You should also wait to be expelled. My father is the school director. I will tell you about your sneak attack on me. Tell my dad." Hearing this, Arina raised her brows, raised her wand and cast another spell silently. A stream of clear water was summoned and slapped directly on Malfoy's face. This time, Irina's silent casting of the clear water as spring spell was seen by everyone, and they were all a little surprised. Even Hermione looked at her in surprise. "Gulu Gulu, my father, Gulu Gulu, is the school director. Give me, Gulu Gulu. Put. Gulu Gulu, I was wrong. Gulu Gulu, stop, stop." Malfoy was washed violently by Irina's clear water, and the remaining water was poured into his mouth, which seemed bound to wash his mouth clean. Malfoy kept choking on the water. He was still saying harsh words at first, but soon he begged Arina for mercy, and then he rolled his eyes. Seeing this, Arina withdrew the spell and shouted, "Please clean your mouth. Otherwise, I don't mind washing your mouth for your father." After spitting out the water in his mouth, Malfoy opened his mouth to curse, but when he saw Arina pointing at his wand, he backed away angrily. At this moment, the little lions all looked at Arina with admiration. They looked at Arina as if they were looking at a holy Valkyrie. "Arina, will you cast a spell on Malfoy?" Hermione looked at her worriedly, the scene where Harry was mentioned by Professor McGonagall just now still vivid in her mind. Hearing Hermione's voice, Arina instantly changed back to her usual non-serious demeanor. She put her arm around Hermione's shoulders and said with a smile, "It's okay. I'll be locked up for a while at most. Anyway, because of the reason this morning. The matter of catnip, cat strips and cat teasing sticks has been confinement-ed by Professor McGonagall for a week. No need to worry if the debt is large." Hermione rolled her eyes again. Is this how the phrase, "you have plenty of debt but you don't have to worry about it," is used? However, Hogwarts would not punish Arina for a non-offensive spell like clear water. After the flying lesson, everyone rushed to the auditorium to eat. In the auditorium, Harry, who was released by Professor McGonagall, came to the Gryffindor long table. After seeing Harry, Malfoy walked over from the Slytherin table, and Crabbe and Goyle followed him. "Having your last meal, Potter? When will you take the train back to the Muggles?" Malfoy, who had been washed by Arina with a spring of clear water, still couldn't change his nature. He arrogantly taunted Harry. Naturally, Harry couldn't bear it, and he immediately sarcastically returned. Malfoy raised his head and invited Harry to a duel. if you have no objection, then tonight, there will be a duel between wizards, using only wands. Before Harry could speak, Ron on the side agreed directly, so fast that Arina almost thought he was an undercover agent. No problem. Who is your assistant? Malfoy glanced at the two big idiots behind him, thought for a moment, and said, Crabbe. How about at midnight? We'll meet you guys in the trophy room, where the door is never locked. After saying that, Malfoy walked away proudly. Watching Malfoy leave, Harry looked at Ron in confusion. Ron, what's going on with the wizard duel? What's going on with the assistant? Ron said lightly, oh, if you die, the assistant will follow. Ron's calm appearance once again made Arina wonder if he was an undercover agent sent by Malfoy. However, after Ron caught the horrified look on Harry's face, he hurriedly added, however, people will only die when they have a formal duel with a real wizard. People like Malfoy can only shoot sparks at best. It's impossible to hurt the other party. Come on, you're not much better than others. Arina was speechless as she listened. At this moment, Hermione, who was holding Irina's hand, couldn't sit still. Sorry to bother you. I couldn't help but eavesdrop on your conversation, but you must not wander around the castle at night. Think about it, if you are caught, how many points you will lose to Gryffindor. Hermione said indignantly. Arina doesn't feel much at all. Although she is also a Gryffindor, but with the famous savior here, you can deduct points. After all, Gryffindor must be Gryffindor at the end of the semester. Fortunately, it was Harry. If he had to change someone else, Gryffindor would have become a Gryffindor long ago. Harry didn't take it seriously. This is a duel between Malfoy and me, and it has nothing to do with you. At this moment, Harry seemed to think of something. His eyes lit up, he looked at Arina, and said, Arina, your magic level seems to be very good, can I invite you to be my assistant? Quote. The clear water curse that Arina cast silently earlier shocked Harry severely. You know, it was difficult for him to cast even the most basic floating spell. Hearing this, Arina spread her hands and made a helpless expression. You know, Harry, I was locked up by Professor McGonagall for a week. Harry was a little disappointed immediately, but he was so stubborn that he couldn't bear to ask Hermione for help, so he could only ask Ron to be his assistant. Ron agreed without hesitation. After dinner, Slytherin dormitory. Lynn, who took out the Desert Eagle and was about to continue alchemy, saw Malfoy, who had been laughing wildly since he came in from the door. Hey, Roll, do you know that Harry Potter in Gryffindor is a fool? I asked him to duel in the trophy room at midnight tonight, and he really believed it. I'll tell Phil directly later. Odd reports, Potter is about to finish his game. Ha 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 ha. Malfoy couldn't stop laughing, he said to Lynn, showing off. In his opinion, being able to cheat the savior is definitely a bragging rights. However, Lynn did not agree with him, but asked quietly, you are Malfoy, one of the 28 sacred families, right? Malfoy was stunned. Of course. Lynn sighed and said, but what you have done, is there one thing that you, Malfoy, should do? Look at what you plan to do, break the rules of wizard duels, and use such cleverness as snitching. Knock down the opponent. As a descendant of the pure blood family, you did not defend the glory of the pure blood family at all, but trampled your own face under your feet. You are embarrassing Malfoy. Although Lynn didn't value the so-called pure blood, he could only teach people like Malfoy in accordance with their aptitude in the manner of a pure blood family. After all, Malfoy attaches great importance to the nobility of pure blood and naturally does not allow himself to tarnish the reputation of pure blood. At this time, Malfoy was stunned, looking at his hands in disbelief. Yes, what is he thinking about? Wizard duels were originally invented by pure blood families as a way to win glory, but he wanted to trample it with his own hands. Sorry, Lynn, Although Malfoy was arrogant, he was not stupid. He immediately looked at Lynn in shame. Lynn waved his hand. He was not interested in these children's play-by-play grievances. Since you have made an appointment for a duel, then you just perform the contract. Don't disturb my alchemy. After all, Lynn raised his hand and cast a light curtain to isolate his desk, so as to block the sound from the outside world. Malfoy wasn't annoyed when he saw Lynn like this, he just nodded vigorously, and said to himself, I see. Crabbe, you can refresh me, and come with me to participate in the meeting with Bo, a special duel. When Malfoy made up his mind, Lynn had already started alchemy. A desert eagle will be enchanted by multiple alchemy circles at the same time, and each alchemy circle must have its core alchemical rune. Therefore, after Lin N completed the energy source and rune hub last night, the first thing to do now is to complete the 4 alchemy circles of dexterity, lightness, precision, and strengthening, the engraving of the core alchemical runes. These 4 alchemy runes are the main runes of the alchemy circle they are in, and after the main runes are engraved, the auxiliary runes need to be engraved. For example, the auxiliary runes of the dexterity attribute include alchemy runes such as speed, smoothness, and direction that help strengthen its dexterity. According to Lin's plan, he needs to complete a complete alchemy circle every day. For 4 consecutive days, he will complete the 4 alchemy circles of the Desert Eagle, and on the 5th day, he will supplement the missing parts and connect them in series or in parallel to complete the enchantment of the Desert Eagle. While Lin was refining the alchemy circle with the dexterity attribute as its core, Malfoy had already taken Crabbe and Goyle towards the prize display room. On the other side, Harry and Ron also set off towards the trophy display room. Hermione failed to dissuade them and had to follow them. On the way, they also took Neville with them, who was locked outside the common room. Soon, 2 groups of people arrived at the prize showroom one after another. In the trophy display room, crystal glass cabinets sparkled in the moonlight, and trophies, shields, medals and statues shone with silver and gold in the darkness. The 2 groups of men pulled out their wands at the same time and pointed at each other. "Potter, I didn't expect you to really dare to come. I thought you would hide in the bedroom and cry for your mother." Malfoy scoffed. "Not to be outdone," Harry said sarcastically, "really? I thought that was something only you could do. Are you sure you're not forcing the things you've done on me?" On the side, Ron imitated vividly, "I want to tell my dad." Ron's imitation show completely angered Malfoy. Malfoy stepped forward and pointed his wand at Harry. "Come here, it's time for a wizard's duel." As he spoke, Malfoy followed the etiquette of a wizard's duel in a strict manner. And Harry clumsily performed the duel salute the way Ron taught him. 3, 2, 1, it's hot and spicy. As the countdown ended, Malfoy took the lead in casting a pimple curse. As a child of a pure-blood family, Malfoy was naturally exposed to magic in advance. Although his magic talent was not as high as Lin's, there was no big problem in mastering some minor curses in advance. Harry looked at the magic spells coming at him quickly and quickly dodged them. Harry didn't know how to do much magic, so before the duel began, Ron told him to dodge Malfoy's spells as much as possible. Grin and hula. Malfoy chanted the curse again, and another beam of light quickly hit Harry. Harry dodged awkwardly, and one spell after another hit Harry's feet. "Potter, can you only run away? Why don't you change your name to Mouse?" Malfoy laughed wildly, but Harry, who was forced to dodge constantly, could not reply at all. But at this moment, Hermione suddenly stepped forward. Although she was very dissatisfied with Harry and Ron's violation of school rules, she did not want to see her friend being beaten helplessly by Malfoy. "I'm Harry's assistant. Harry is not feeling well, please replace me," Hermione shouted coquettishly. In the absence of Arina, she may be the only one in the Gryffindor camp that has the power to fight Malfoy. Harry frowned and wanted to say something, but was dragged back by Ron covering his mouth. Although Ron is mediocre, he is not stupid. If a master makes a move, they must just lie down and win. Malfoy didn't care that Harry changed his assistants. In his opinion, he just needed to beat them all. Malfoy didn't think Hermione was that powerful. After all, she was just a Muggle seed. Thinking of this, Malfoy cast the first curse at Hermione without hesitation, Tarantella Dance. Although Malfoy's dancing spell is to control Hermione's movement, so that she can only dance and cannot dodge the subsequent spell, it also means watching her lively. Seeing this, Hermione became angry. Wingardium Leviosa. Although it was just a basic levitating spell, it was extraordinary in Hermione's hands. A silver trophy flew high into the sky, and then suddenly hit Malfoy on the back of the head. Well, Malfoy rolled his eyes and fell to the ground. It's great to be young, just fall asleep. Hermione's instant kill left everyone stunned. Crabbe stepped forward quickly. According to the rules, he was Malfoy's assistant. All petrified. However, even Malfoy was knocked out by Hermione, let alone Crabbe. Hermione just threw a body-binding curse casually, and Crabbe was held in place. All petrified, Hermione, who was hilarious, cast another body-binding spell, which also controlled the innocent-looking Goyle. Hermione, you are my god. I'm sorry, Hermione, I was too cruel before. Harry and Ron's attitude towards Hermione has completely changed, and the two looked at Hermione with admiration. HMPH. If I don't do this next time, I won't be allowed to violate school rules in the future. Hermione raised her head and planned to return to the team. Meow. But at this moment, a meow came. I saw a skinny cat with dark gray fur squatting at the door of the prize showroom, looking at everyone with its bulging eyes like light bulbs. The next moment, it ran away quickly. Oops, it's Mrs. Norris, Filch must be nearby, let's run. Ron exclaimed. He grabbed Harry with his left hand and pulled Hermione with his right hand, and ran towards the prize display room. Harry's other hand was dragging the panting Neville. At this time, Filch's voice came from afar. Mrs. Norris, have you seen the little wizard who violated the rules? I'm coming right away. Then, the sound of running came. This scared everyone in Gryffindor to death, and Harry led everyone quietly along a corridor filled with armor. Fortunately, the Malfoy trio who were held in place bought them time. Filch first arrested the Malfoy trio, and then continued to pursue Harry and others. After realizing that Filch's voice was getting closer and closer, the timid Neville couldn't help but let out a scream. He ran away, but he stumbled, collided with Ron, and fell onto a suit of armor. Superior. Run, Harry yelled, and the four of them ran at full speed down the corridor. After an unknown amount of time, Harry and the others ran to the end of the corridor, which was a locked door. Hey, what are you doing? At this moment, a voice like the sound of heaven came not far from them. Hermione looked over unexpectedly. Irina, why are you here? Irina blinked innocently and said, I just heard you guys crying and howling when I was released by Professor McGonagall, so I stopped by to take a look. Ron whimpered, don't look. We're screwed, we're dying. Harry explained from the side. We were chased all the way by Filch, and it turned out that this is a dead end. At this time, the sound of footsteps came from a distance, and the owner of the footsteps was obviously Filch, who had been chasing him all the way here. Oh, come here quickly. Hermione was a little annoyed. She knocked on the lock of the locked door with her wand, and shouted, Allaho hole is open. The lock clicked and opened. Hermione pushed Harry, Ron, and Neville in forcefully, then dragged the bewildered Irina in, and finally closed the door again. Just when everyone thought they were safe, Irina poked Hermione carefully. Stop it, Irina, Hermione gasped. Irina said speechlessly. It's not me, please look up. Hearing this, Hermione froze when she looked up. I saw a three-headed dog that was tall enough to hold up the ceiling, filling almost all the space. It had 3 heads, 3 pairs of ferocious eyes, and 3 drooling mouths that seemed to swallow everyone up. Down. With the size of Harry and the others, in front of these 3-headed dogs, it was like a snack, crunchy every bite. Don't worry, it's asleep. Irina comforted everyone kindly. But how could everyone calm down? Instead of facing this terrifying monster, they would rather be captured by Filch. Harry fumbled and unscrewed the door handle. After everyone came out, he slammed the door and ran away. Everyone quickly ran back to the portrait of the fat lady on the 8th floor, and even Irina was forced back by Hermione. Please, don't make such a fuss, it's just a 3-headed dog. Irina said helplessly. It's just a 3-headed dog. Harry's eyes widened in disbelief. It can swallow 5 of us in one bite. After reporting the password and entering the Gryffindor lounge, Harry and the others calmed down. At this time, Hermione said angrily, You guys, don't you see what it's standing on? Harry and Ron were dumbfounded. They just looked at the head of the 3-headed dog. Who knew what it was standing on? In the end, Irina stroked Hermione's hair and said, I see, it's a trapdoor. Hermione calmed down after being patted by Irina. She nodded and said, Yes, the trapdoor. It's obviously guarding something. Harry pondered. He seemed to know the whereabouts of the dirty little bag in the underground vault of Gringotts 713. On the other side, the Malfoy trio returned to the dormitory in despair after being severely scolded and deducted a lot of house points from Slytherin House. Looking at Lin En, who was doing alchemy, he suddenly became angry. I knew it a long time ago, so I reported it directly. I am so mad. Lynn squinted at him. Why, haven't you ever hit me? Malfoy was immediately unconvinced. What do you mean you haven't been spanked? I pressed down that idiot Potter and spanked him. I slapped him with a smile and grinned. That Potter was everywhere like a mouse. Escape. It's just that Granger took advantage of my inattention and played a sneak attack, completely ignoring martial arts. Lynn, let me tell you, the wand named Granger is pointing at me, but I'm not afraid, I'm on guard against it all. But who knew she would use the levitating control to hit me with a trophy? I was careless, no dodge, and then get knocked down. Malfoy babbled onto Lynn, as if he wasn't even a bit guilty of the defeat. Neither Crabbe nor Goyle looked at him. So you still lost. If you are not convinced, fight again next time. What's the use of telling me? Lynn was speechless. Malfoy chuckled. Oh, you are not an alchemist, you must have some good treasures, right? Lend me a use, and I promise to return it to you after beating Potter. Lynn spread his hands and said, nothing. Granger doesn't use any alchemy tools. You don't even have the confidence to defeat a Muggleborn, do you? Please, he's not Doraemon, why are you looking for him? Hearing this, Malfoy immediately became dissatisfied. What are you talking about? How could I, a majestic Malfoy, not be able to defeat a little Muggle wizard? Just wait, I'll practice magic for 2 days and then I'll find my way back. Quote. After dismissing Malfoy, Lynn chuckled. What a child. With this in mind, Lynn continued to work on the alchemy in his hand. It wasn't until 2 o'clock in the morning that he completed the alchemy circle with the attribute of dexterity as the core. Lynn put away the mithril carving knife and went to bed. At the breakfast dinner the next day, Lynn was sitting on the long Slytherin table. Not far away, Malfoy and others were winking at Harry, like a big peacock in heat. This scene did not catch the eyes of the Slytherin seniors. At this time, owls poured into the auditorium as usual, and a slender package carried by 6 long-eared owls attracted everyone's attention. Lynn knew that this was the broomstick Nimbus 2000 given to Harry by Professor McGonagall. Although Lynn was not interested in flying or Quidditch, this broomstick still attracted his attention. Why is Nimbus 2000 faster than other broomsticks? Is there some special alchemy circle added to it? You must know that the flying broomstick is also a kind of alchemical product, which naturally contains various alchemical formations. Lynn had secretly picked up a flying broomstick from the flying class equipment that was too broken to fly at all, and analyzed the alchemical array contained in it during the summer vacation. When he was carving the dexterous attribute alchemical array last night, the auxiliary rune of the speed attribute used comes from the flying broomstick. If I also buy a Nimbus 2000, wouldn't I be able to analyze the alchemy circle in it and make use of it? Lynn thought so. In fact, ordinary alchemists cannot easily analyze the alchemical formations contained in other alchemical products, because most alchemists use special alchemy techniques to hide their alchemical formations during alchemy, known to outsiders. Otherwise, if any alchemist can analyze the alchemy circle after obtaining Nimbus 2000, then pirated Nimbus 2000 will probably be everywhere, and the price of Nimbus 2000 will definitely plummet. The reason why Lynn was able to easily analyze the alchemical formations contained in other alchemical products was because Nico Flamel taught him a special alchemy secret before he left. This alchemical secret method can make the alchemical array hidden inside the alchemical product emerge on the surface, allowing Lynn to observe it with the naked eye. In this backward British magical world where there is no so-called patent law, if Lynn analyzes the magic products of well-known brands and publishes the alchemy circle, I am afraid that the entire British magical world will be in chaos. If Nico Flamel, with his more than 600-year-old vision, could have determined that Lynn was generally a good boy, otherwise he would never have been able to teach Lynn such a powerful weapon, and would have rather died than taught him. Take it underground. On the Gryffindor table, Ron looked at Harry's text message to Professor McGonagall with envy, sighing, Nimbus 2000. I haven't even touched it. Arina, who was not far away, also looked over curiously. Although her flying talent was not as good as Harry's, she still had a certain interest in flying. Of course, it was just an interest in flying, not Quidditch. If Arina was asked to join the Gryffindor Quidditch team, she would most likely refuse. After learning that the package in their hands contained the Nimbus 2000 broomstick, Harry and Ron couldn't sit still. After all, Harry could only feel at ease if he hid the broomstick in his dormitory. So, Harry and Ron hurried back to the dormitory and hid the Nimbus 2000. During the whole day's lessons, Harry's heart seemed to stay in the dormitory with Nimbus 2000. He didn't listen to any lessons at all. It wasn't until 7 o'clock in the evening that he couldn't wait to bring Nimbus 2000 to Quidditch. Go in the direction of the field. On the other side, Lynn was worried about something. Last year, Professor Green gave him a long list of books as supplementary materials for his study of alchemy in the past 3 or 4 years. Even though his current level of alchemy is not low, the books on the list can still be used for his alchemy. Provides great help. But here comes the problem. Most of the books in the second half of these book lists are stored in the restricted area of the library. After Professor Green left Hogwarts, the signature slip that Professor Green gave to Lynn was naturally lost. It lost its original effectiveness, which prevented Lynn from going to the restricted book area to borrow books with the signature slip as before. It's not that Lynn didn't think about applying for a signature slip from his dean, Professor Snape, or other professors, but obviously no professor would, just because Lynn wanted to study alchemy, which he could only take in 6th grade, put him in the forbidden book area easily. After all, even the optional alchemy knowledge in the 6th grade can be borrowed in the general books section of the library, and the restricted books section stores some advanced and even dangerous knowledge. For the safety of the students, these professors will not let the student made unauthorized contact. Therefore, Lin En had no choice but to go out at night after the curfew, using the illusion spell taught to him by Professor Green, to enter the forbidden book area invisibly to search for the books on the book list. Since the library has been cast with warning magic, even if Lin casts the disillusionment curse, he can only hide in the restricted book area and read books, or bring his own notebook and copy them. Otherwise, once the books in the restricted book area are taken away from the library, if you enter the library's warning magic will be triggered and Lin will be discovered, even if the books are copied using the double copy spell. In the next week, Lin not only had to refine an alchemy circle every night, but also went to the restricted section of the library to look for books. Soon the weekend came, and Lin had completed the enchantment of the Desert Eagle and copied an entire alchemy book from the forbidden book area. Of course, he did not copy this alchemy book in vain. He could use several alchemical runes and the schematic diagram of the alchemy circle recorded in this book when enchanting the bullets of the Desert Eagle. Yes, Lin's plan before Halloween is to enchant all the 100 bullets that come with the Desert Eagle. Under normal circumstances, it is unrealistic to enchant 100 bullets in less than 2 months, but the size of the bullet is only a tiny bit, and it cannot enchant an overly complex alchemical circle. After a while, Lin En's engraving speed will naturally be much faster. However, it is also difficult to engrave the alchemy circle on a small object, which will test Lin's energy to a certain extent. On the other hand, in the 2 months before Halloween, Arina began to grope for the wandless casting of the freezing spell through her silent casting method. Without someone's guidance, it is not that easy to cast spells without a wand. At least Irina's attempts to cast spells without a wand for 2 months ended in failure. But Irina's freezing spell is not without any progress. At least without the wand, Arina can condense a small piece of ice for her own use. With the strong affinity of the ice element, it can be condensed out of thin air. The ice cubes can be transformed into shapes such as daggers by Arina, which allows Arina to have a certain ability to protect herself even if she loses her wand. Soon, Halloween is coming again. On the eve of Halloween, the whole Hogwarts castle is filled with the sweet and tempting smell of roasted pumpkin. In the charms class for first-year students at Hogwarts, Professor Flitwick announced that he would teach everyone how to cast the levitation spell, except for children like Arina, Hermione and Malfoy who were gifted or had been exposed to magic in advance. Wizards have long since taught themselves the levitation spell. Professor Flitwick divided the students in the classroom into 2 groups. Harry's partner was Seamus, the explosive genius, and Ron's partner was Hermione. As for Arina, when Professor Flitwick demonstrated the levitation spell, he received praise and extra points from Professor Flitwick for suspending the feathers with a silent levitation spell, and got the privilege of not needing to practice. Come on, Hermione. Arina was holding a bag of snacks, cheering Hermione up while eating. However, judging from Hermione's proficiency in casting the levitation charm in the prize showroom that day, it seemed that she didn't need Irina's support at all. The levitation spell of genius little wizards only requires them to wave their wands and move their minds to achieve it, but for ordinary little wizards, they need to strictly follow the requirements to cast the levitation spell, wave and shake, and recite the spell accurately. Only then can the floating spell be cast. Obviously, Ron is not the so-called genius little wizard. Wingardium Leviosa, Ron yelled, swinging his wand arm like he was swinging a sledgehammer trying to hit someone. Looking at Ron's exaggerated movements, Irina couldn't help but feel ashamed. You said it wrong, his partner Hermione said unceremoniously at the side. It's Ugadim, Levio saw. The word, plus, needs to be long and clear. Ron's face turned dark, his fragile self-esteem did not allow him to be taught by others, and he roared, since you are so good, come and try. Ouch, Irina swallowed the snack in her mouth. Ron seems to have forgotten that Hermione was the one who defeated Malfoy with the levitation spell. Hearing this, Ron was stunned. And Hermione waved her wand, Wingardium Leviosa. Not to mention the feathers in front of Hermione's eyes, even the table in front of them flew up with Hermione's thoughts. Hermione's beautiful levitation spell was naturally praised by Professor Flitwick. After class, Ron's mood was extremely bad. He felt that his self-esteem had been trampled. He said to Harry next to him irritably, no wonder everyone can't stand her. To be honest, she is too nosy. It's like a nightmare. At this moment, Ron felt his shoulder being hit by someone. The person didn't look back after hitting him, but walked over in a hurry. Ron took a look and found that the person was Hermione, and she seemed to be crying. Suddenly, Ron seemed to be hit hard on the head. It's Irina. Ron, you are really too much. Hermione is kind enough to teach you, hoping that you can learn the levitation spell and become more powerful, but what are you thinking? Do you think she is mocking you? Do you think are you worthy? Ron, put away your fragile self-esteem, your face was given by yourself, not by others. Irina scolded Ron. As Hermione's best friend, she naturally felt uncomfortable seeing Hermione so sad. She looked very angry. Even when Malfoy called her a mudblood, she had never been so angry. Ron believed that if the person standing here was not himself, but another little wizard, Irina might not be so angry at this time. A freezing spell has been cast. After blaming Ron, Irina did not stay long, but chased Hermione away. During the next lesson, Harry and Ron discovered that neither Irina nor Hermione showed up, and had been missing all afternoon. On their way to the Great Hall for the Halloween dinner, they overheard Parvati Patil telling Lavender that Hermione was crying sadly in the women's room, and no matter how hard Irina tried to persuade her, it was of no use. Thinking of Irina's previous scolding, this made Ron even more uncomfortable. I'm not wrong, Hermione is obviously too lenient. Ron muttered. Even Harry felt that Ron was too extreme. You know, if it weren't for Hermione's help on the day of the duel with Malfoy, I'm afraid both he and Ron would have been beaten by Malfoy. However, after walking into the auditorium and seeing the colorful Halloween decorations, the two immediately forgot about Hermione. On the other side, Lynn walked into the auditorium expressionlessly. He took a few quick bites to satisfy his stomach, and then closed his eyes and meditated at the Slytherin table. He understood that today was the day when Quirrell became a demon for the first time, and he had to be prepared for all possible emergencies. After all, the underground classroom is underground in the castle, and the Slytherin dormitory is also underground in the castle. No one knows whether that troll will suddenly change its original route and directly meet Lynn and the others when they return to the dormitory. Lynn had been recharging his energy throughout the whole day, and even the matter of enchanting the Desert Eagle bullets was stopped a day early. It's not like Lynn didn't think about using the Desert Eagle to directly attack the giant monster, but let's not talk about whether the Desert Eagle's bullets can break through the giant monster's rough and fleshy body. This alone will make the desert. The fact that the eagle was confiscated by the professor meant that Lynn could not do this. The Desert Eagle is Lynn's biggest trump card this school year, and he naturally won't expose it prematurely. At this moment, the garlic-head Quirrell suddenly rushed into the auditorium. He fell to the ground. His face was horrified, and he gasped and shouted, "Troll, in the underground classroom. I thought you should know." After speaking, Quirrell fainted. The auditorium suddenly became chaotic, with countless young wizards looking panicked and screaming at a loss. Lynn, on the other hand, looked at Quirrell who had fainted coldly. He acted quite well. Do you want me to award you an Oscar? At this time, Professor Dumbledore fired several purple fireworks with his wand, and then everyone calmed down. Prefect, Professor Dumbledore said in a low voice, lead the students from each house to their dormitories immediately. Then, the prefect at the front of the Slytherin table stood up and asked everyone to follow him back to the dormitory immediately. Lynn followed the team up. Just when he was about to return to the dormitory as the prefect said, he suddenly discovered that it was not only Hermione who disappeared from the Gryffindor table, but also a person named Irina Lowell. Girl. Irina Lowell has more conspicuous silver hair, so her disappearance is naturally easily noticed by others. Lynn's expression darkened. Could it be that Lowell and Hermione were also in the underground classroom together? He changed his mind. Although he didn't know whether the person named Lowell was a time traveler, he didn't want this only possibility to be lost to the troll because of an accident. So, Lynn cast a disillusionment spell on himself and quietly left from the end of the line. On the other side, Irina helped Hermione stand up. Although Hermione was still very sad, her empty stomach forced her to go back to the auditorium to eat. Come on, the dinner will be over if you don't leave. Irina patted Hermione's back lightly, and with the other hand, she gently wiped away the tears from the corners of Hermione's eyes. Don't look at Irina, who seems to be very patient, but she is very anxious in her heart. Others don't know, but she knows that a giant monster will come over later. If they don't take Hermione away, I'm afraid they will be blocked by trolls. Fortunately, she had an idea and used the matter of eating to lure Hermione to go with her, otherwise Hermione would not know how to cry until the year of the monkey. But at this moment, heavy footsteps came from outside the door of the women's restroom, and a stinky smell emerged, as if the water from the stinking ditch had been boiled and poured into the snail noodle soup with minced stinky tofu and durian. Come in. Irina only felt that it was very similar to the car exhaust that exceeded the standard in her previous life. After taking a deep breath, the sour smell echoed back and forth in her nasal cavity. Vomit, vomit. Irina and Hermione retched at the same time. Their movements seemed to have attracted the giant monster's attention. The giant monster seemed to peep inside the door, then slowly lowered its head and got into the women's toilet. Ah! Hermione exclaimed suddenly. I saw this monster was 12 feet tall, with dull skin as gray as granite, and a huge and clumsy body like a pile of huge mud, with a small head like a cocoa bean on it. The giant's short legs were as thick as tree stumps, with flat, calloused feet underneath, and the smell from it was disgusting, and it was holding a thick wooden club in its hand. Because of its long arms, the stick dragged on the ground. Irina cursed secretly. Hermione's exclamation made the troll look over. It was obvious that this battle was inevitable. Just as Irina was about to strike first, the door of the women's restroom was suddenly locked, and there were two idiots cheering outside. This directly ruined Irina's original plan to pull the troll. Are you out there sick? Irina cursed angrily, while waving her wand in her hand and casting a freezing spell at the troll. Hearing Irina's scolding, Harry and Ron outside realized that they were still in the women's room. Harry and Ron hastily reopened the door. Wingardium Leviosa. Seeing this, Irina quickly cast the levitation charm, lifted Hermione, who was motionless in place, moved from above the troll to the door, and threw it out. Hermione hit Harry and Ron directly at the door. Take her and run outside first, I'll come out right away. As Irina said, she ran towards the troll quickly, and kept casting freezing spells in her hand. It's just that the giant monster's skin has a strong ability to resist magic, and the freezing spell on the giant monster's skin can only make a piece of frost appear on the surface of the giant monster's skin, but it is far from freezing it. Irina's attack seemed to have enraged the troll. The troll raised the thick wooden stick in its hand and threw it at the small Irina. At this time, Irina had already arrived at the troll's feet. It was the sink, and she could hardly avoid it. Seeing this, Irina had no choice but to close her eyes, and slid a sliding shovel towards the troll. Fortunately, Irina's sliding shovel slipped under the giant monster and came behind the giant monster just before the wooden stick hit it. Shattered to pieces. While running towards the toilet, she didn't forget to turn around and cast a crushing spell to attack the troll's anus. Ouch! This crushing spell seemed to really traumatize the troll. The troll let out a howl of pain. Then its eyes turned red, and it chased Irina with a big stick. At this time, Irina had already run out of the toilet and joined Harry, Ron and Hermione. After experiencing a huge shock in her heart, Hermione had come back to her senses. When she saw Irina running towards her, she responded to Irina and at the same time, she cast an eye curse at the troll. Harry, Ron, you go find the professor first, Hermione and I will hold it back. Irina ordered, while she retreated and used the freezing spell to slow down the troll's movement. Although her freezing spell was ineffective, the ice that was constantly forming on the surface of the troll's skin was slowing down its movements all the time. No, we will defeat the trolls with you, Harry said loudly. Ron nodded with the same hatred and said, I know I was the one who was sorry for you before, and I will never leave alone. Irina was about to vomit blood. Don't you know how much magic you have? As for the magic resistance of the troll, can you break it? Go and find the professor. Irina was about to collapse inside. Hearing this, Harry and Ron looked at each other and nodded. Okay, be careful. With that said, the two turned around and ran out. Finally, no one was holding back, and Hermione kept up with Irina's pace very well. Although Hermione's freezing spell is not as powerful as Irina, their purpose is not to freeze the troll or kill it, but to delay its pace until the professor arrives. However, things always don't go as expected. The troll seemed to be even more angry under the attack of the two. In its view, being played by two little ones was a huge shame. This giant monster is like the boss in the game that has entered a violent state. The frost condensed on the surface of its body shattered under its force, and the thick wooden stick was swung out hard by it, heading towards it hit the ground with a sweep. Irina rolled and narrowly avoided the swing of the wooden stick, but Hermione was unfortunately hit in the back, her body flew out, and she hit the wall dozens of meters away and fainted. Seeing this, Irina was a little desperate. Harry and Ron had just left, and they would definitely not be able to bring the professor back in a short time, and her spell was almost immune to the giant monster, which put her in almost a desperate situation. The water is as clear as a spring. The ground is frozen and the sky is freezing. Irina gritted her teeth, almost overdrawing the remaining magic power in her body. A large amount of water flew out from the top of her wand and turned into solid ice under the control of the freezing spell. The ice exploded under Irina's control and turned into countless sharp ice picks. Go! Irina waved her wand vigorously, and the countless ice cones exploded in the direction of the troll like a hail of bullets. However, even though this ice cone is powerful, it is not as thick as the giant monster's skin. At most, these ice picks can only scratch the surface of the giant monster, causing the giant monster to bleed a little, but cannot cause any more damage to it. The troll strode forward and swung the wooden stick to hit Irina repeatedly. At this moment, the magic power in Irina's body was almost exhausted, and as a girl, she was already exhausted. She could no longer dodge this terrifying blow. Thump! Her calves softened, and she stumbled forward and fell forward, completely losing hope of avoiding the blow. If I had known, I would have tied Hermione back to the Great Hall. Irina regrets it extremely. Why is she so soft-hearted? As a result, I am going to die too. At this moment, a golden beam of light shot out of the air and hit the giant monster's cocoa bean-like head hard. The huge force hit the giant monster, causing the giant monster's movements to deviate greatly, and the thick wooden stick also came out. The wooden stick hit Irina hard, and the air wave blew the petite Irina away. Irina looked in the direction of the beam. I saw a black-haired boy slowly walking out of the shadows in the corner. Dozens of metal blocks were suspended around the boy. These metal blocks were emitting a strong light and seemed to be accumulating power. The black-haired boy had dark red eyes, and there seemed to be a dark red light flashing on the tips of his hair, and his eyes were staring at her. Stand back and leave this to me, Lynn said calmly and walked to Irina on foot. The dozens of metal blocks floating around him seemed to have completed charging up, and dozens of golden beams like before burst out from the metal blocks, constantly bombarding the giant monster. Blood holes appeared on the giant monster's body. These golden beams seemed to be extraordinary. There was a golden energy in the blood holes they created that was corroding the giant monster's body and expanding the monster's injuries. Senior, you. Irina looked at Lynn in disbelief. This black-haired boy must be only in the 2nd grade. How could he have such great power? In her opinion, maybe even the professors at Hogwarts are no more than that. Lynn glanced at her, took out a bottle of magic potion from his pocket, and threw it to Irina. Healing potion, for 2. Lin said, a flame igniting in his left hand. This flame glowed with black light. It was the forbidden magic fire that Lin had previously refined in Nico Flammel's manner. Although the trolls rely on brute force, and the magic forbidden power of the forbidden fire has no effect on them, the flames fused with alchemy themselves have a higher temperature, and their lethality is naturally far greater than ordinary flames. A raging summoned magical flame. Lin flicked his left hand, and the forbidden demonic fire immediately flew out, clinging to the surface of the giant monster's body like gangrene attached to the bones, constantly burning the giant monster's body. As the flames flew out, Lin waved his wand with his right hand, and the gravel on the ground suddenly turned into countless vines, which wrapped around the troll's toes, making it unable to move. Under the burning of this terrifying flame, the giant monster kept screaming, but without the wooden stick, it had no ability to resist with such a heavy body. The flames continued to burn the giant monster's body, burning its skin into black coals. On the other side, the metal blocks around Lin were also constantly firing golden beams, causing greater damage to the giant monster. A few minutes later, a thicker golden beam burst out, entering from the giant monster's left eye and blasting the giant monster's head. The giant monster's bulky body finally fell down. Arina came over and took a look. The monster's head was completely shot, and countless blood mixed with brains exploded all over the floor. This disgusting scene made Arina vomit. Lin didn't say much. He glanced at the direction he came from, and seemed to sense something. He waved his wand and cast the disillusionment charm on himself. He didn't feel much about this disgusting scene. This was because he had already seen Kasaragi's head shot off last Halloween. When he saw this kind of scene again, he naturally had a certain feeling, immunity. After putting on the disillusionment charm, Lin left the scene immediately. And just a few breaths after Lin left, a series of loud footsteps came from a distance. Arina, Hermione, we're back, are you all right? After hearing that there was almost no movement here, Harry and Ron over there became anxious, and the two arrived here almost instantly at a flying speed. After seeing the giant monster's exploded head, the two of them froze in place, and then vomited wildly with Arina. Soon, Professor McGonagall, Professor Snape and Quirrell who followed at the end rushed over. After seeing the exploded head of the troll, Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape also frowned obviously, and then revealed the color of shock. Quirrell rolled his eyes and fainted again. Professor McGonagall came over. She looked at Arina in disbelief and asked, Miss Lowell, did you do all of this? Arina reluctantly raised her head. Her beautiful face was now covered with dust. She shook her head and said, No, Professor, a senior came here just now to save me. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall frowned. She took a look at the troll's skin that was blackened by flames, its body that was pierced by unknown magic, and the vines on the ground transformed by the transformation spell. She also understood that Arina, what you said is true. This level of powerful magical power and transformation is naturally impossible for Arina and others to achieve. But, looking at the somewhat familiar vines, Professor McGonagall thought, with such a powerful transformation ability, the opponent should be a member of his own transformation club. Arina, can you tell me the appearance of that senior? He saved you and got rid of the trolls for Hogwarts. We should all thank him. Professor McGonagall thought for a while and asked Irina. Arina hesitated and said, I only remember that he was surrounded by many metal blocks, wearing a Slytherin robe, and his hair was black with a little dark red at the tips. As she spoke, her eyes suddenly lit up. Oh, by the way, he is very handsome, very handsome. Arina said. Throughout her 2 lives, she had seen many handsome boys, but the black-haired boy who saved her was one of the few who could amaze her. Of course, this is inevitably due to the hero's aura of saving beauty, but the other party's own appearance is already worthy of praise. Are you sure that student is from Slytherin House? At this time, Professor Snape walked over slowly and asked in a deep voice. As the dean of Slytherin House, he didn't even know that there were such powerful students in his house. If this was true, it would be a dereliction of duty on his part. Professor McGonagall on the side was thinking deeply. Slytherin, black hair, extremely good at transfiguration. There were not many students who met this condition. The only one she knew well was Lin Roar, but he was only a second-year student. How could a student possess the magical power to crush giant monsters? You know, it would be very difficult for an ordinary second-year wizard to even cast a disarming spell. Professor McGonagall shook her head and put the mysterious Slytherin student behind her. The top priority now was to deal with the troll. At this moment, Professor McGonagall seemed to have thought of something, her eyes were filled with anger, and her lips turned pale. So, what the hell are you playing? You're lucky not to be killed by it. Why don't you just stay in the dormitory? Professor McGonagall asked the three angrily. Irina glanced at Hermione, who had passed out. She first carefully picked her up and gave Hermione and herself half a bottle of the healing medicine that Lynn gave her. Then she looked at Professor McGonagall explained. Professor, Hermione and I have been in the women's bathroom and didn't know what happened in the auditorium. We didn't understand until the troll appeared that it was too late. Ron took a step forward and admitted his mistake. Professor, these are all because of my mistakes. I said bad things about Hermione after class in the afternoon and she heard her, which caused her to break down and cry in the women's bathroom. Harry didn't want his good brother to be punished alone, so he stood up and shared the responsibility. Professor, I was also at fault. I should have stopped Ron. After all, Hermione is our friend. Professor McGonagall looked at the people in front of her, and the anger in her heart dropped slightly. She said sternly, Mr. Potter and Mr. Weasley, 30 points will be deducted from Gryffindor because of your mistakes. Harry and Ron immediately lowered their heads in discomfort, but they didn't say anything more. After all, it was all their own fault. But soon, Professor McGonagall continued to speak, and her tone became gentle. However, you did not face the troll alone, but sought help from the professor, which earned Gryffindor 5 points. In addition, Miss Lowell, you and Hermione each earned 10 points for Gryffindor for your bravery in holding the troll out of the dungeon and hurting the other students. In the end, Irina and Hermione each scored 10 points for Gryffindor, and Harry and Ron scored 5 points together. The four of them received a total of 25 house points. But because of Harry and Ron's mistakes, Gryffindor was deducted 30 points, so even though they scored 25 points, Gryffindor's score still dropped by 5 points. At this time, Professor Snape's deep voice sounded, although the identity of the student cannot be determined, for the fact that the student defeated the troll and saved his classmates, Slytherin will add 30 points. In this regard, Professor McGonagall has no opinion. I will notify Professor Dumbledore of this matter, and you can go. Professor McGonagall looked at Irina and the others and said. Irina hurriedly carried Hermione out of the disgusting corridor and walked up 2 flights of stairs, followed by Harry and Ron. Irina, why did you tell Professor McGonagall that it was a Slytherin who defeated the troll? If you said it was you, then these 30 house points belong to us Gryffindor, not to our arch-enemy Slater. Linz. Ron complained suddenly that he had a bad impression of Slytherin. Hearing this, Irina stopped in her tracks. She gave Ron a cold look, and said, if it wasn't for that senior, Hermione and I would have died already. Hearing Irina's words, Ron was stunned. Only then did he realize what he had said. Yes, if it weren't for that Slytherin senior, I might have lost 2 friends forever, but I was hostile to the other party because he was a Slytherin. Snapped. Ron gave himself a big mouth. Irina, I'm sorry, It is true that Ron has many shortcomings, but he is generally a kind person, and he is naturally unwilling to do such things as repaying kindness with hatred. Irina carried Hermione to the school hospital on the 2nd floor of Hogwarts Castle, and Harry and Ron followed. Madame Pomfrey carefully examined Hermione's injuries. The abominable troll was really strong. Hermione's ribs were broken several times, and her spine also showed signs of fracture. If it weren't for the fact that this is a magical world, and magic can heal most physical injuries, Hermione would probably have to deal with it here. Poor child, her injuries are very serious. If her injuries were not sustained by the power of a magic potion, she might not be able to survive here. Although I used magic to treat her, she still needs to be hospitalized for a few days for observation. Madame Pomfrey cast healing magic on Hermione, and then said to Irina and others. Irina's mood was a little low. She nodded gently and left the school hospital without disturbing Hermione's rest. On the other side, Lynn returned to the Slytherin common room from another corridor. After killing the troll, he heard the movements of Harry and others. Therefore, he did not stay at the scene for a long time, but used the disillusionment curse to advance, left the scene. The common room was crowded with people at this time, and even the noble little snakes could not calm down now, which made the Slytherin common room very noisy. Since the dinner had just begun and was interrupted by Quirrell, the little snakes were all eating the food that was served. Lin did not join in, but returned to his dormitory before lifting the illusion curse. The Malfoy trio were still eating in the common room, and the dormitory was empty. Lin raised his hand, took out the dozens of metal blocks that were clinging to his clothes, and put them into his canvas bag. These metal blocks were a parting gift given to him by Nico Flamel. They were named Alchemy floating cannons by Lin. They can independently absorb magic energy from the air and launch highly lethal missiles at the enemy according to Lin's thoughts. Magic beam. The combat principles of these alchemical floating cannons are similar to the alchemical array that Professor Green used when he fought Kasaragi on Halloween last year. However, the alchemical array on the alchemical floating cannon can use specialized alchemical creations as a carrier. Although its power is not as powerful as Professor Green's, he carries the alchemy circle with him, but the magic power consumed by Lin is close to zero. After all, apart from spending a small amount of magic power to control them to fight, Lin didn't need to spend any more magic power at all. Could it be? She is really a time traveler. Lin frowned. Although he didn't arrive at the first time, it was obvious that this troll incident was completely inconsistent with what he knew. Hermione was not injured in the original book, and Harry and Ron did not run to find the professor for help. It would make sense if all these changes were caused by the butterfly effect caused by the time travelers, but Lin was not sure whether the butterfly effect was caused by the silver-haired girl or herself. Although Lin affirmed that he had almost no interference in the development of the plot, this possibility made Lin, who was rigorous in his work, unable to ignore it. It seems that we still need to test it more. Lin thought so and disarmed himself. The next day, Arina got up very early. She didn't even eat breakfast, so she ran to the school hospital to visit Hermione. With the help of healing magic, Hermione recovered well. She smiled and told Arina that she would be discharged from the hospital in 2 days. This made Arina regain her original cheerfulness. She hummed a little tune and came to the auditorium to attend the breakfast banquet. Just as she sat down at the Gryffindor table, picked up a piece of bread and was about to start eating, she saw Lin, who was eating at the Slytherin table. When she saw the familiar black-haired boy, her eyes suddenly lit up and she stood up wanting to say hello. But at this moment, the black-haired boy seemed to be looking towards her. Arina saw the black-haired boy smiled mysteriously at her, put his index finger up in front of his lips and made a "shish" gesture. The black-haired boy shook his head slightly and gestured again. Arina seemed to understand what the other party meant. She suppressed her emotions and sat down to enjoy the breakfast dinner again. After the breakfast banquet, Arina came to the lawn outside the castle, where the black-haired boy was already waiting. "Senior, thank you." Arina thanked her gratefully. Lin shook his head slightly and asked, "How is the injury of the girl with you?" Lin was referring to Hermione, and since he had not been in contact with her since this school year, he did not directly say Hermione's name. Arina was stunned for a moment, and then said in a clear voice, "Hermione is recovering very well, and thanks to the healing potion you gave us, Senior." Madame Pomfrey said, "If it weren't for your healing potion, she would have been able to survive with Hermione's injuries. She may not be able to survive the school hospital." The effect of that kind of healing medicine was particularly good, even several times better than the healing medicine that could be bought in Diagon Alley, which made Arina feel that Lin's life experience must be extraordinary. "That's good. You'd better be careful this school year. After all, Hogwarts doesn't seem to be peaceful this year." Lin said meaningfully. Arina nodded vigorously and said, "Yeah, thank you, Senior. By the way, my name is Arina Lowell, Senior, just call me Arina." Lin nodded slightly and said, "Lin Roar. Is this Senior actually from the Roar family?" Arina was a little surprised, but she was relieved when she thought that Lin was from Slytherin house. Although he is from a pure blood family, others are surprisingly good. Arina thought so. Arina looked at Lin's left hand and asked curiously, "By the way, Senior Luor, I saw you throw out flames with your left hand when you were dealing with the troll yesterday. Was that a wandless spell?" Irina's eyes were sparkling. "You know, the goal she is currently conquering is the wandless casting of the freezing spell. Maybe this Senior can give her some advice." Lynn nodded. Irina quickly said, Senior Luoer, to be honest, I am trying to cast the freezing spell without a wand, but it has been failing and I can't find the key. Although it is a bit presumptuous, I would like to ask Senior to give me some advice. Chapter 51. Although it was only the second time that she met this Senior Luoer, her desire to cast the freezing spell without a wand made her couldn't help but ask. Hearing this, Lynn was a little surprised. And when he recalled the strong ice elemental magic power fluctuations he noticed when he sensed Irina's magic aura on Platform 9 that day, he understood. It seems that Irina also has a strong affinity for an element like herself. This can be seen from the freezing spell that Irina cast silently when she fought against the troll yesterday. Well, it's not difficult to cast spells without a wand, as long as you. Lynn told Irina his experience in casting spells without a wand in short words. A year ago, he might have treasured wandless casting as his trump card, but now he has more and more powerful trump cards, and the ability of wandless casting has become his regular fighting method. In this case, he naturally did not need to hide it from Irina. After receiving Lin En's guidance, Irina felt enlightened. She once again said gratefully, Thank you, Senior Luoer, for your guidance. Irina is very grateful. Lin En shook his head and said, Cultivation is a personal matter. If you can practice wandless spellcasting, it is your own ability. If there is nothing else, I will go back first. Lin did not stay here long, but returned to Hogwarts Castle. Before Halloween, he completed the enchanting of the Desert Eagle and its bullets, and in the next half year, the matter of refining more forbidden fire should also be put on the agenda. Time passed quickly, and Merlin's socks changed from black stockings to white stockings. Hogwarts Castle is surrounded by snow, and the entire land takes on a white hue. The weather is getting colder, especially after entering November, and even the surface of the Black Lake is covered with a layer of snow. Thick ice as hard as tempered steel. Every morning, Hagrid, Hogwarts gamekeeper, wrapped in a long moleskin coat, rabbit fur gloves, and giant beaver fur boots, defrosts broomsticks on the Quidditch pitch. These are naturally because the Quidditch season at Hogwarts has begun. After joining the Gryffindor Quidditch team for several weeks, Harry was about to participate in his first Quidditch match, which made him very nervous. Harry's love for Quidditch is unquestionable, which makes him not even pay much attention to his usual studies for Quidditch training. If it weren't for the two university tyrants, Irina and Hermione, he would never be able to do it. It is impossible to complete so much homework. It is said that Hermione also recommended a book to Harry called The Magic of Quidditch, which gave Harry a better understanding of the history of Quidditch in the wizarding world. For example, if you are a referee at a Quidditch match, you'd better be safe, otherwise you're more likely to disappear and be discovered months later in the Sahara Desert. Ever since the troll incident, whether because of guilt or something else, Ron's attitude towards Hermione has become much better, which makes the relationship between the four of them much closer than before. The day before the Quidditch match started, Irina, Hermione, Harry and Ron took advantage of the recess to come to the yard outside. Hermione used magic to create a handful of bright blue flames. The flames are almost harmless and keep them warm. And just as they were using the fire to keep warm, Professor Snape, clad in black robes like a mysterious big bat, came behind the four of them. He saw the book in Harry's hand. Professor Snape glanced at Harry's green eyes. His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but when he moved his eyes downward and saw Harry's signature Potter face, something appeared in his eyes. Disgusted. What's that in your hand, Potter? Harry showed the magical Quidditch in his hand. In his opinion, there was nothing wrong with this book. Professor Snape saw Harry taking out the book. Without even looking at the book, he said without hesitation, Library books are not allowed to be taken out of the school. Give it to me, Gryffindor. 5 more points will be deducted. As a result, Professor Snape confiscated Harry's book, and Harry could only watch indignantly as Professor Snape limped away with his book. Irina on the side spread her hands helplessly. Who made you look so similar to your father? If you look more like your mother, I'm afraid I've prepared a whole set of books for you. I wonder what happened to his leg, Harry said suddenly. Ron gloated. Whatever, I hope it hurts him enough. Suddenly, Hermione said, when Professor Snape's robe was lifted just now, I saw that there seemed to be a wound on his leg. The wound seemed to be bitten, but his wound was so big that ordinary animals would not be able to cause it. It's not such a big wound, I think it's a bit like the three-headed dog I saw when I first started school, Arina answered. Hearing this, Harry and Ron looked at them immediately. Hermione suggested, "Why don't we go investigate at night and see what's going on?" After the troll incident, Hermione seemed to be less resistant to breaking school rules. In the past 2 months, Arina often took Hermione to the kitchen in the middle of the night to find food. As for how she knew where the Hogwarts kitchen was, her story was that a Hufflepuff badger told her. Of course, Hermione didn't know that Arina had never had contact with the little wizards of Hufflepuff House, and it was impossible for Hufflepuff to tell the secrets of the kitchen to people in other houses. At night, the Gryffindor common room was noisy. Arina and Hermione checked Harry's and Ron's homework respectively. To be honest, Arina felt more and more like a nanny. After checking the homework, the 4 of them took action immediately. Harry proposed to go to the staff lounge in the name of getting the books back. As long as there were other professors around, Professor Snape naturally couldn't trouble them with empty talk. So, Harry quickly went downstairs and knocked on the door outside the staff lounge, while Arina and the other 3 hid behind the door and peeked. Harry knocked on the door several times, but there was no response. Harry had no choice but to quietly push the door open a crack and observe the scene inside. The sight in the room startled Harry. At this time, there were only 2 people in the staff room, Snape and Filch. Snape lifted up his bat-wing-like black robe, revealing a bloody leg, while Filch handed him the bandage. Snape said irritably, "How could you possibly stare at 3 heads at once?" Just when Harry was about to continue reading, Professor Snape discovered him. "Potter," Professor Snape said angrily, his face almost crumpled with anger, and he put down his black robe to cover his injuries. "Professor, I was wondering if I could get my book back." Harry tried to use the excuse he had thought up before. Professor Snape roared, "Get out! Get out!" Professor Snape looked very scary at this moment, and Harry felt that if he retreated without knowing the current situation, Gryffindor's house points would probably be cleared. Harry quickly exited the room and closed the door behind his back. After doing this, he took a deep breath and looked at his friends behind him. "How is it? Have you seen everything?" Harry asked. Arina nodded. "Yeah, judging from Professor Snape's wounds and his words, his injuries were caused by the 3-headed dog and he didn't run away." Although Arina knows the truth of the matter, the clues in the hands of her friends are limited, and she cannot directly reveal the god's perspective. "Therefore, I can only humbly teach you. Do you know what this means?" Harry held his breath. "On Halloween night, Ron and I saw him going in the direction of the 3-headed dog. Obviously, they were looking for the 3-headed dog guarding the place's things." Harry swore, "I'll bet my broomstick that he let that troll in to divert people's attention." "Well, so your broomstick was crushed by the Whomping Willow 2 years later." "Don't raise flags randomly." Arina blinked innocently. Harry frowned and said decisively, "What do you mean by setting a flag randomly?" "Arina, just tell me if there is anything wrong with my analysis." "I'm telling you, if the troll wasn't brought in by Snape, my Nimbus 2000 will crush the Whomping Willow. It's not that I don't want to help you, it's that you are really hopeless." Arina looked at him helplessly, as if she was seeing an old general on a stage with flags behind him. Hermione wanted to refute Harry. In her opinion, the professor at Hogwarts was at least not a bad person. But there was nothing wrong with Harry's analysis, and Harry swore with his own Nimbus 2000, which left Hermione speechless. The next day, early morning. On the day of the Quidditch match, the weather was clear and cold. At this time, there were still nearly 5 hours before the official start of the Quidditch match, so the Quidditch pitch was still very deserted. Except for Hagrid, who was defrosting his broomstick, there was no one around. However, after Hagrid had finished defrosting and left, an uninvited guest arrived before everyone else. This person was Lin N. Lin N was holding a metal block the size of a Rubik's Cube in his hand. After using his wand to cast a disguise spell on himself, Lin N quickly walked towards the teacher's seat in the audience. Although Lin's relationship with Professor Snape at Hogwarts Castle could not be said to be very good and could only be described as an ordinary teacher-student relationship, Professor Snape was also his dean after all, and he did not want his family to. The dean was wronged. Therefore, if Quirrell behaves like a monster, let Quirrell bear the consequences. The metal block in Lin's hand is an alchemical bomb that can be triggered remotely, and he intends to stick it to the bottom of Quirrell's chair. In order not to harm other professors or classmates, when Lin N was refining this alchemical bomb, he used a special alchemical circle to limit its explosion range. When this alchemy bomb is triggered, there will be an invisible magic shield covering a 1-meter radius of the alchemy bomb, and the power of the alchemy bomb after it explodes will be limited by this magic shield. That is to say, if this alchemy bomb explodes, only Quirrell will be injured. Well, the world where only Quirrell is injured is born. Lin firmly fixed the alchemy bomb under the chair assigned to Quirrell and nodded with satisfaction. At this time, some people may want to say, since Lin wants to avoid Voldemort, why does he want to get involved in this matter? You know, judging from Lin N's identity alone, he can't avoid it for a while. Since he will face Voldemort sooner or later, it is better to stand on the opposite side early and take the initiative while everything is still under control. Quirrell is the carrier of Voldemort. If he is injured, Voldemort will be unable to cause trouble for at least a period of time. And this period will be Lin's best development period. Lin's biggest hope is to refine the forbidden magic fire that can cover a room before the end of the school year. This way, even if Voldemort leaves Quirrell's body, he will have certain ways to deal with it. After completing this, Lin quickly returned to the castle, pretending that he had never left the castle. In Hogwarts Castle, a group of young wizards were enjoying their breakfast dinner. But at this time, Harry was too nervous to eat because of the upcoming Quidditch match. It's just a Quidditch match, Harry, there's nothing to worry about, it's not the OWL's exam that's about to start. Arina said openly. She looked very relaxed. After all, when she was taking the college entrance examination, she ate well on the day of the exam and even had the time to play 3 games. In her opinion, Quidditch games and the like are just small scenes, and there is absolutely no need to be nervous. After all, this isn't the Quidditch World Cup, it's just a little brawl between a group of kids. Harry looked at her with a resentful look on his face. Arina, don't stand and talk without your back hurting. If you have the ability, go ahead. Arina shrugged. I can do it, but do you dare to let me do it? I don't dare. Harry lowered his head and forced a piece of sausage into his mouth. Soon, the time came to 11 o'clock. Teachers and students from the entire Hogwarts castle came to the auditorium of the Quidditch pitch. The seats were high and almost half empty, but sometimes it was still difficult to see the game. In the Gryffindor camp, Arina led Hermione to the highest row, where Ron, Neville, Seamus and others were already waving flags and cheering. They used a sheet stained by rat scabbers to draw a huge banner that read, Potter must win, and Dean, who was good at drawing, also drew a large Gryffindor lion underneath. Arina stayed away from the sheets with some disgust. The decades-old man still wet the bed. Although he was in the form of a mouse, it was still disgusting. Hermione didn't know this, so she cast a clever spell on the bedsheets, making the paint on the banner flicker in different colors. On the other side, Lin also came to the Slytherin camp. As Malfoy's roommates and seniors, the Malfoy trio came early to occupy Lin's seat. Thanks. Lin nodded slightly to Malfoy. The Quidditch game had already begun when Lin took the seat Malfoy had left for him. The members of the Gryffindor and Slytherin Quidditch teams were seen surrounding Ms. Hooch, who was serving as the referee. After listening to Ms. Hooch's reminder, they all mounted their broomsticks. Harry stepped on his Nimbus 2000, the best of all the broomsticks in the room. 15 broomsticks soared into the air and were distributed in various positions on the Quidditch pitch. The quaffle was immediately snatched by Gryffindor's Angelina Johnson. That girl was such an excellent chaser, and she was so charming. The little Gryffindor wizard Lee Jordan, who served as the commentator of the game, stood on the commentary seat and shouted loudly. Jordan. Professor McGonagall, who was standing beside Lee Jordan, immediately shouted. I'm sorry, Professor. Lee Jordan shrank his neck and explained normally, she was really flying all the way up there, and made a beautiful pass to Alicia Spinnet. She was a talent discovered by Oliver Wood, who was only a substitute last year. The ball was passed to Johnson again, and then, oops, the Slytherin team snatched the quaffle, and the Slytherin team captain Marcus Flint got the quaffle and flew away. Flint flew like an eagle on it. He was about to score. No, Gryffindor goalkeeper Wood made a beautiful move and the ball broke. Lee Jordan worked hard to explain, and the atmosphere at the scene became more and more excited under the passionate explanation. At this time, the person holding the quaffle on the field was Katie Bell, the chaser of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. She was flying around Flint nimbly, trying to find a chance to shoot. But at this moment, a bludger hit Katie Bell on the back of the head, causing the quaffle in her hand to be stolen by Adrian Pusey of the Slytherin Quidditch team. Say darted toward the goalposts, only to be knocked down by another bludger. At this time, the bludger was pushed aside by Fred, and Angelina Johnson of the Gryffindor Quidditch team regained the quaffle. At this time, there was no resistance in front of her, and she quickly flew towards the Slytherin goalpost, dodged an incoming bludger, and bypassed the goalkeeper of the Slytherin Quidditch team, Blake, and shot the quaffle into the goalpost door frame. Madame Hooch immediately blew the whistle, announcing that Gryffindor had scored. This made the lion cubs of the Gryffindor camp cheer. The cheers of the lion cubs echoed in the cold air, mixed with the roars and groans of the young snakes. After Angelina Johnson scored for Gryffindor, Harry, who was far away in the sky, happily controlled Nimbus 2000 and performed a somersault to express his joy. As the seeker of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, Harry was able to fish in the air unscrupulously. After all, he had nothing to do until the golden snitch appeared. In the commentary box, Lee Jordan did not stop commenting because of a goal. He seemed to be even more excited. The Slytherin team got the ball. Chaser Sepp lowered his head to avoid two bludgers, and then another Weasley brothers and Suitor Bell, and ran to, "Wait, what is that? Is that the golden snitch?" Lee Jordan's words faltered for a moment, and then he burst into more violent emotions. "I saw a golden light flying past the left ear of Adrian Sepp, the chaser of the Slytherin Quidditch team, and flying around during the Quidditch match." The appearance of the golden snitch immediately ignited the atmosphere of the entire stadium. Students from any college were waving flags and cheering for the seekers of their own side or the side they supported. As a seeker, Harry naturally saw the golden snitch immediately. He controlled the Nimbus 2000 to dive and chase the golden light. Not far away, Terrence Higgs, the seeker of the Slytherin Quidditch team, also saw the golden snitch. He and Harry flew in the direction of the golden snitch almost side by side. In this tense moment, the other members of the two Quidditch teams seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to do, and were hovering in midair, watching the fight between Harry and Higgs. Even though Higgs is more experienced, Harry's broomstick is Nimbus 2000, which already creates a large gap in terms of hardware. At this time, Harry could already see the small ball of the golden snitch's flapping wings, and he speeded up again. But at this moment, the Slytherin Quidditch team showed their tradition of not practicing martial ethics. Their captain Marcus Flint deliberately controlled the broomstick and hit Harry, causing Harry to fall. Lee was knocked off course. This extremely illegal behavior caused Flint to be reprimanded by Ms. Hooch, and the Gryffindor cubs below also surrounded Flint's mother and greeted Flint's mother at 360 degrees. Ms. Hodge, who acted as the referee, ordered the Gryffindor team to take a free kick in front of the goal post, but even so, the golden snitch was lost again in the chaos. In the top stand of the Gryffindor camp, Dean Thomas, who was born as an ordinary person, shouted loudly, "Send him off." Referee. Red card. Ron on the side reminded, "This is not football, Dean. In a Quidditch match, you can't send someone off. By the way, what is a red card?" When Dean explained to Ron what a red card was, Lee Jordan, a Gryffindor, was also furious. In this way, after the obvious and despicable cheating just now, Lee Jordan said angrily, "Jordan," but Professor McGonagall, who was always fair, warned him. Lee Jordan changed his words. "I mean, after the public and disgusting foul behavior just now." Professor McGonagall growled, "Jordan, let me remind you." Lee Jordan had no choice but to pause helplessly, and after sorting out his words, he spoke again, Okay. Flint almost killed the Gryffindor team's seeker. I believe this thing's happened to everyone, so Gryffindor takes a free kick." Although the rhetoric was changed twice in a row, Lee Jordan's eccentric words still made Arina in the stands give her a thumbs up. As the game continued, something suddenly happened to Harry. After Harry controlled the Nimbus 2000 to dodge a bludger, his broomstick suddenly rioted, and the broomstick flew rapidly, shaking, as if trying to throw Harry off. Harry gripped the handle of the broom tightly with both hands, and clamped the broomstick tightly between his knees. He had never been so afraid. At the same time, two figures in the Gryffindor camp and the Slytherin camp suddenly stood up, their eyes invariably looking in the direction of the teacher's chair. Quirrell starts acting like a monster. Such thoughts appeared in the hearts of Lynn and Arina at the same time. At this time, on the Quidditch field, Harry's broomstick was twitching and twisting crazily, gradually taking Harry away from the field. I really don't know what Harry wants to do, Hagrid muttered in the stands. He looked carefully through the telescope. If I didn't know him so well, I would think he couldn't control his broom. But he can't. Hagrid didn't understand the seriousness of the matter, he just thought Harry was using some special tactics. But suddenly, everyone in the stands looked at Harry, and saw that Harry's Nimbus 2000 began to roll and roll, which made him barely able to hold on without falling. Immediately afterwards, Nimbus 2000 twisted wildly again, which caused Harry to be thrown off. At this critical moment, Harry grabbed the broom handle with only one hand, hanging in the air dangerously. Did something go wrong with the broom when Flint collided with him just now? Seamus whispered in the stands. Impossible, Hagrid said, his voice trembling slightly. Except for powerful black magic, nothing can interfere with a flying broomstick. It is impossible for a child to cast such magic on Nimbus 2000. Hagrid's words seemed to lead Hermione's thinking in the right direction. After hearing Hagrid's words, Hermione grabbed Hagrid's telescope. She did not raise her head to look at Harry, but began to look anxiously at the crowd. What are you doing? Ron said with a despairing expression. Harry's current state almost made the Gryffindor team lose the possibility of victory. I had guessed it, Hermione gasped, it's Professor Snape. Look. Ron grabbed the telescope, and Professor Snape stood in the middle of the stands opposite them. He stared at Harry and muttered silently. He's causing trouble, hexing the broomstick, Hermione said to Ron and Arina. Ron was so anxious that he jumped up and down. Then what should we do? Look at me. As Hermione spoke, she turned around and planned to walk in the direction of the teacher's desk. But at this moment, Arina stopped her and said, Wait, Hermione, look. With that said, Arina turned Hermione's head and asked Hermione to look in Quirrell's direction. That's Professor Quirrell, Hermione said in disbelief. In her impression, Quirrell is just a courageous person who even stutters in class. He doesn't seem like someone who would use black magic on Harry. What's more, Quirrell and Harry have no enmity. Like Professor Snape is targeting Harry on weekdays. Arina nodded. Yes, not only Professor Snape, but Quirrell is also looking directly at Harry. He seems to be reciting some spell. But before Arina could finish her analysis, Ron, who saw Quirrell through the telescope, said loudly, I know, it is Professor Snape who is using black magic on Harry. The timid Quirrell can only do it silently. Quirrell, who counter-cursed to save Harry and silently dedicated himself to his students, what a good person he is. Hearing this, Arina slapped her forehead. Great analysis, don't do it again next time. Arina patted Ron on the shoulder and said sincerely. Looking at Hermione, who believed Ron's analysis and was about to set off to stop Professor Snape, Arina said, Hermione, let me do it. My magic level is higher. With that said, Arina squeezed towards the teacher's bench one step ahead of Hermione. Arina intended to use the excuse of stopping Professor Snape, but actually attacked Quirrell to interrupt the spellcasting. Alas, my dear Stuart, I can only help you so far. Arina sighed. She made it through the crowd with difficulty and came not far from Professor Snape and Quirrell. She quietly drew out her wand, ready to cast a spell. At the same time, more than 100 meters away, in the Slytherin camp, Lin En looked far away in the direction of the teacher's chair, holding a metal block in his hand. As he poured the magic power in his body into the metal block in his hand, the corners of his mouth raised slightly. 3, 2, 1, let's go. Snapped. Lin counted down softly, and after the last second counted down, he snapped his fingers vigorously. Bang! On the teacher's seat, the alchemy bomb under Quirrell's seat received a magic signal and exploded immediately. Terrifying flames soared up, swallowing up Quirrell along with the seat, and a huge shock wave hit Quirrell's butt hard, pushing Quirrell violently upwards. A violent explosion happened suddenly, but what is strange is that the explosion seemed to be huge, but its scope was only the part where Quirrell was. A few meters away, Arina, who was already harboring ulterior motives, staggered in fright at the sound of the violent explosion, and almost fell to the ground. Oh! I saw that under the terrifying shock wave, Quirrell was blown up into the sky, and after flying upwards for more than 10 meters, he fell headfirst towards the lawn of the Quidditch field. On the teacher's bench, Arina watched Quirrell's miserable state, and patted her chest, which was not plump, with some fear. Suddenly, she seemed to think of something, and turned her attention to the Slytherin camp. This kind of magic bomb with terrifying power but capable of limiting the range may only be made by a skilled alchemist, and recalling the metal blocks surrounded by senior roll that day, Arina had no choice but to make this explosion. The accident was associated with the senior roll. Is this a coincidence, or? Arina thought with some confusion, but soon, her eyes turned resentful. She was shocked by the sudden explosion. Wow, this requires mental damage fees, I'm serious. Above the lawn of the Quidditch pitch, thanks to Professor McGonagall, after seeing the danger that his colleagues were in, he cast a timely floating spell to levitate Quirrell in the air. Otherwise, Quirrell would have been hit head first and his brains would have been destroyed. Explosion can't be saved even by magic. Quirrell was trembling with fear, but there was a sinister light in his seemingly frightened eyes. Quirrell's butt was already a bloody mess under the explosion. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall rushed over in time and ordered several Gryffindor students not far away to take Quirrell to the school hospital. Quirrell was lifted up by several Gryffindor students using a levitating spell. Blood flowed from his buttocks and legs, and the bones in his legs were almost shattered. It had reached the point where he had to take the bone spirit to heal. His lungs he was also hit hard by the shock wave, and blood flowed from the corners of his mouth. He scanned the stands with evil eyes, trying to find the culprit, but he was destined to find nothing. You trash, the products of human alchemy are all stuck under your butt, and you didn't even notice it. In Quirrell's mind, Voldemort was also scolding him, accusing him of his uselessness. Meanwhile, the Slytherin camp. Malfoy looked at Quirrell who was blown away and said bluntly, Quirrell exploded. Suspected national essence leaked. Lin N, who had done bad things but had no guilt at all, glanced at him and thought to himself. The fact that Quirrell was blown away by the alchemy bomb did not affect the progress of the Quidditch match. Although it was a very serious matter for the Hogwarts professor to be openly attacked, it was not enough for the wizards to let it go, interrupting a Quidditch match in progress. At the teacher's desk, Professor Snape stopped reciting the counter curse. He kept scanning the surroundings, checking for any possible crisis. According to Professor Snape, the explosion of the alchemy bomb was a long-planned attack. Although the target of the attack was not a good thing, this kind of attack without any clues was a major threat to Hogwarts. After all, today Quirrell was attacked, and tomorrow any professor or student may be attacked. Professor Snape's eyes were full of vigilance. He even left the teacher's chair and patrolled the stands constantly, performing the duties of a professor. In the Gryffindor camp, Hermione looked at Arina in disbelief. Are you crazy? You actually attacked the professor with an explosive curse. Moreover, it was obviously Professor Snape who was chanting the curse. Why did you attack the wizard? Professor Luo. Hermione didn't see clearly what happened at the teacher's desk. She just thought of Irina's actions and the coincidence of the explosion, so she had to think that Arina did it all. Arina blinked her big ice blue eyes innocently. Hermione, I didn't do this. When I first got there, Quirrell exploded. I was even shocked. Saying that, Arina felt aggrieved. Hermione also understood that she had misunderstood Arina. She quickly hugged Arina and apologized repeatedly. On the Quidditch pitch, the Nimbus 2000, which had regained control, was controlled by Harry and dived towards the ground. He almost hit the ground with his whole body. Harry was seen covering his mouth with his hand as if he was about to vomit. Harry crawled on all fours, coughed hard, and a golden snitch appeared in the palm of his hand. I caught the golden snitch. Harry lifted the snitch high into the air and waved it vigorously. Hey, I don't know if this golden snitch will be used again in the future. Arina tilted her head subconsciously. This is really an imported product. Just like that, the Quidditch match ended in chaos. Even 20 minutes later, Flint, the captain of the Slytherin Quidditch team, was still yelling angrily. He didn't catch the golden snitch, he almost swallowed it. In Flint's opinion, how could any seeker catch the snitch with his mouth? However, Flint's protest did not change the final result. After all, Harry's behavior did not violate any rules. Amid the cheers of Gryffindor, the commentator Lee Jordan announced the result that Gryffindor won by 170 points to 60 points, which brought the atmosphere to the extreme. Some people are happy and some are sad. While the Lion Cubs are cheering and celebrating, the Snake Cubs feel very depressed. But all this had nothing to do with Lynn. After Quirrell exploded as he had planned, he got up and left the scene, returning to Hogwarts Castle to prepare for refining the forbidden fire. It was rare for him to have some free and uninterrupted time, so Lynn naturally wanted to make use of it. Hagrid's hut outside Hogwarts Castle. Arina, Hermione, Ron and Harry, who had completed the game, came to Hagrid's hut together. The owner of the hut, Rubeus Hagrid, was making a cup of strong tea for Harry. Snape definitely did it, Ron said to Harry and Hagrid. We all saw it. He was chanting a spell on your broomstick, muttering in his mouth, and keeping his eyes fixed on you. Fortunately, Professor Quirrell will recite the counter curse for you, otherwise Harry, you will be in danger. Harry was a little surprised. What? But I saw Quirrell was blown away. Ron vowed. Snape must have done it. After he found out that Professor Quirrell was reciting a counter curse for you and hindering him, he took action to kill Quirrell. Fortunately, Professor McGonagall was here, otherwise Quirrell the professor has left us forever. Arina covered her face, and Sri Lanka got another scapegoat. Hagrid didn't believe him. Nonsense. How could Snape do such a thing? It's impossible for him to attack his colleagues and his own students. Ron was anxious. What I said is absolutely true. If anything I said is false, then let me eat chocolate and get the love potion. Arina looked at him sympathetically. She felt like she was looking at Harry and Ron as if she were looking at Farewell My Concubine on the stage. Arina quickly grabbed the anxious Ron. After exchanging a look with Hermione, she decided to let Hermione explain. Hermione said to Hagrid, Hagrid, we discovered something about Professor Snape. He seemed to want to pass the three-headed dog on Halloween. The three-headed dog bit him. We think she wanted to. I want to steal what the three-headed dog is guarding. Arina continued. Of course, it is not ruled out that Professor Snape was just on a routine patrol and was attacked while passing by, or he was accidentally attacked by a three-headed dog while chasing a bad guy. Harry and Ron looked at Arina in surprise. Why are you still excusing Snape? Please, Professor Dumbledore has said that no one is allowed to enter the corridor on the right side of the 4th floor. Why would Professor Snape go there if he is patrolling normally? Harry questioned. Arina explained. There are quite a few little wizards in our Gryffindor night tour. Maybe some of them ran there during the expedition. If this is the case, then Professor Snape can still save our classmates' life. Ron spread his hands. But it's impossible even if you think about it. Think about it, a disgusting guy like Snape probably wants us to die, so how can he come to save us? While several people were discussing fiercely, Hagrid put down the teapot in his hand heavily. The teapot hit the table and made a dull sound, attracting everyone's attention. How do you know Lu Wei? Hagrid asked, looking a little flustered. Lu Wei, as the gatekeeper guarding the entrance to the secret room of the Sorcerer's Stone, would never leave that room on weekdays, but Harry and the others knew about Lu Wei, which obviously meant that they had gone to that room without permission and had seen the three-headed dog. Lu Wei is gone. This made Hagrid a little panicked. The Sorcerer's Stone is a top secret, and it must never be revealed to these little wizards in front of him. Lu Wei, Arina, Hermione, Harry and Ron asked in unison. They turned their eyes to Hagrid, waiting for each other's answer. Yes, it belongs to me. I bought it from a Greek guy the first met in the bar last year. I lent it to Dumbledore to keep him. Hagrid's big mouth kept chattering. What? Harry asked eagerly. Hermione and Ron glared at him, and Harry's question directly interrupted Hagrid's desire to speak. Okay, don't ask any more. That's an absolute secret, understand? Hagrid said rudely that he would never let the secret out. Harry was unconvinced, but Snape wanted to steal it. Nonsense. Hagrid glared at Harry. Snape is a professor at Hogwarts, he would never do such a thing. Hermione questioned. Then why did he want to kill Harry? What happened during the Quidditch game made Hermione change her view of Snape. Having already determined that Snape was the murderer, she was naturally no longer willing to respect someone who wanted to kill her friend. If I see someone casting a hex, I know it, Hagrid. I've read all about them in the books. You have to keep in touch with them with your eyes, and Snape's eyes didn't blink. Don't blink, I saw it. Hermione tried to explain. I tell you, you were wrong. Hagrid said irritably. I don't know why Harry's broomstick behaved like that, but Snape would never want to kill a student. Now, you three, listen to me. You are meddling in things that have nothing to do with you. This is very dangerous. Forget about that three-headed dog and what it is guarding. This is Professor Dumbledore and Nico between Flammel. Hagrid said seriously. Aha, Harry stood up. So it involves a man named Nico Flammel, right? On the side, Irina held her forehead speechlessly. Hagrid, did you grow up drinking truth serum? Irina thought so. I shouldn't have said it, I really shouldn't have let it slip, I really shouldn't have said it. Hagrid said with great annoyance. He was angry with himself. Hagrid was no longer willing to talk to Harry and the others. He roughly kicked the four of them out of his hut, without even taking out the usual rock biscuits. On the way back to the castle, Hermione said resolutely, now that we know that this matter is related to an old man named Nico Flammel, we will start looking for information about Nico Flammel. Let's start from the library. Irina couldn't help but said, no, Hermione, I know who Nico Flammel is. Irina really didn't want her best friend to suffer in search of someone's information, so she had to resort to her own spoiler technique. Hearing this, Harry, Ron and Hermione all turned their attention to Irina. Irina paused and said, Nicolas Flamel is the most famous alchemist in France. He invented the Philosopher's Stone. Hermione asked, Irina, what is the Philosopher's Stone? In the original book, Hermione borrowed a library book a few weeks before the Christmas vacation, which contained information about the Sorcerer's Stone, but in this timeline she has not yet had time to read the book. Irina explained. This is recorded in a book in the library. The ancient French alchemy involves the refining of the Philosopher's Stone, a magical substance with amazing functions that can turn any metal into pure gold, can also be used to create the elixir of life, which will make those who drink this potion immortal. Over the centuries, there have been many reports of the Philosopher's Stone, but the only one so far is the one made by Nicole Flammel. Hermione suddenly said, I see, the three-headed dog must be guarding Mr. Nicole Flammel's Philosopher's Stone. I dare say that Nicole Flammel asked Professor Dumbledore to keep it for him, because they are friends, and he knew someone was playing with the Sorcerer's Stone, that's why he moved the Sorcerer's Stone out of Gringotts. Irina nodded repeatedly. However, if Lynn were here, he would definitely refute. After all, if Professor Dumbledore hadn't asked his master Nicole Flammel to use the Sorcerer's Stone to lure Voldemort into a trap, I'm afraid the Sorcerer's Stone would still be safe and secure in France, and Voldemort would never dare to attack it. The idea of Nicolas Flammel, the great alchemist. You must know that Nicole Flammel is not only a great alchemist, but also a devil-level wizard. Even if Nicole Flammel is over 600 years old, he is definitely not something that a mere remnant of Voldemort can defeat. If that's the case, it makes sense for Snape to want to steal the Sorcerer's Stone. No one can deny immortality. Ron said. The four returned to the castle during the discussion, and they unanimously decided to guard against Professor Snape. Of course, the target of Irina's defense is Quirrell, a wolf in sheep's clothing. A month passes quickly, and Christmas in mid-December is coming. In this nearly a month, Lynn has refined more forbidden fires, and now his forbidden fires can fill half of the Slytherin dormitory. According to Lynn's conservative estimate, before the end of the school year, he should be able to refine enough forbidden flames to fill the potions classroom. If these forbidden fires can be spread, it may guard the secret room of the Philosopher's Stone. There is no problem if it is covered. This morning, Hogwarts Castle woke up from his dream and found himself covered in several feet of snow. The beautiful snowflakes covered the burly castle with a thick velvet coat. Outside the castle, the Weasley twins were using magic to control several snowballs, making them chase Quirrell around, and finally exploded hard on the back of Quirrell's head. Not far away, Irina silently prayed for the Weasley twins, hoping that they would not let Voldemort, who was living on the back of Quirrell's head, hold a grudge. Hey Lynn, good morning. At this moment, the Weasley twins stopped playing with Quirrell with snowballs, and they waved in the direction of the castle gate. Lynn came over and said with a smile, Are you still playing with snowballs? How are you doing in alchemy? The Weasley twins looked at each other, and George said with a smile, "Hey, you underestimate us too much. We have finished reading the alchemy books you showed us, and we can complete the engraving of the simplest series of alchemical circles." Lynn nodded slightly. To be able to say series, a word that does not belong to the wizarding world, it seems that the Weasley twins have really studied the Muggle electricity books he provided. At this time, Lynn turned around and saw Irina not far away. "Senior Luo. Irina saw Lynn appearing and said hello quickly. Fred said, "Hey, Lynn, let me introduce to you, this is our dear brother Ronnie Jr.'s friend, Irina Lowell. But, you seem to know each other." Lynn nodded slightly and looked at Irina. "How is your study of wandless spellcasting going?" Irina raised her left hand, and an icy blue beam of light flew out of her palm, turning the snowball in Fred's hand into an ice ball. "That day, Senior Luo, you taught me the technique of wandless casting. I successfully used the wandless casting of the freezing curse and the clear water spring curse. In addition, I also followed the conversion techniques you mentioned and developed a snow-making spell between a spring of clear water and a freezing spell." Irina said. She waved her left hand again, and a lot of white snow condensed out of thin air, turning into a delicate snowball in her hand. Irina handed the snowball to Fred, which made up for the loss of Fred's own snowball turning into an ice ball. But without thinking, Fred took the snowball and threw it in Irina's face, then ran away laughing. This made Irina stunned. When Irina reacted, she wiped the snow off her face, and the word, hash, clearly appeared on her forehead. "That guy Fred made you laugh. Senior Luo. Senior Luo, I still have some things to deal with, so let's go first." Irina tried hard to keep her original smile. Smile, and be sure to keep up appearances. Irina screamed crazily in her heart. Lynn nodded, indicating that she could go about her business. Irina immediately pulled out her wand and chased in Fred's direction. "Grandma, at worst, I don't want this image anymore." Irina waved her wand, and 3 freezing spells shot out of the air, freezing the unexpected Fred in place. Not long after, Fred's ghostly cries and howls were heard in the distance. Lynn smiled and shook his head, then turned back toward the castle. On the other side, after the dissuasion of the 3 Harrys, Irina stopped beating Fred. Off to the side, George laughed at Fred. "I was careless and didn't dodge," Fred said angrily, causing everyone to laugh. Not long after, George took Fred, who was bruised and swollen, to leave first, while Harry and the 4 returned to the castle. On the day before the Christmas holiday, the auditorium had been decorated very beautifully and spectacularly. The walls were covered with hanging eggs composed of holly and mistletoe, and 12 towering Christmas trees stood around. Some of the trees were hung with glittering little icicles, while hundreds of candles flickered on some trees. Harry and others also saw professors using magic to decorate the auditorium. Professor Flitwick used his wand to spray out strings of golden bubbles and hung them on the branches of the newly moved Christmas tree, while Professor McGonagall directed the senior students of the Transfiguration Club to cast them together. Transfiguration decorates the auditorium. However, although most of the members of these Transfiguration clubs were seniors in the 6th and 7th grades, Irina discovered that Senior Roar, who was only in his 2nd grade, was also standing among them. Lynn waved his wand lightly, and small Christmas trees transformed into small Christmas trees, which were moved to where they should be by the levitating spell. With Lynn's current magic strength, the transformation magic of these Christmas trees can be maintained until the end of the Christmas holiday. Lynn's transformation efficiency is extremely high. 1 person is equivalent to 3 or 4 senior students. Under the command of Professor McGonagall, it only took them 10 minutes to complete the arrangement of the transfiguration technique in the entire auditorium. Good days always come quickly. Christmas morning. After Lin En woke up from the soft bed, he saw the gifts at the foot of the bed. To his surprise, there were 9 gifts here, 2 more than last year. Lin got out of bed with interest and opened the first gift. This gift came from his mother, Rowena, and contained an invisibility cloak and a letter from his parents. Although the invisibility cloak has a strong functionality in the wizarding world, its short validity period makes its sales volume not very high. After all, wizards who have the money to buy the invisibility cloak can use the disillusionment curse to replace it. A wizard who knows the disguise charm probably can't afford an invisibility cloak. Therefore, Compared with its powerful functionality, the existence of the invisibility cloak is more like a luxury product. Of course, this invisibility cloak can also be a good alchemy material for Lynn. After reading her mother's letter, Lynn continued to open the gifts. This time, Lynn was opening gifts from 3 professors, Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick and Professor Snape. Most of the Christmas gifts that professors give to good students are the same. For example, Professor McGonagall gave something more special. For advanced transfiguration notes, Professor Flitwick still gave him a wand care kit, while Professor Snape gave him a bottle of healing potion. After the 3 professors, there was the Christmas gift from the Weasley twins. The Weasley twins' Christmas gift was a large jar of canary biscuits. With Lynn's help, they came into contact with and learned alchemy in advance, and invented many prank products in advance, and this jar of canary biscuits is one of them. However, Fred and George seemed to have the intention of playing tricks on Lynn, and they did not even tell her about the special nature of this can of canary biscuits. If Lynn's secret method hadn't allowed him to see the alchemy circle contained inside the canary biscuits, he might have eaten the can of canary biscuits as ordinary biscuits. Still need to be taught a lesson. Lynn smiled, shook her head, and opened the next Christmas gift. Opening the gift, there was a hand-knitted black sweater inside, with a big letter, R, on the chest of the sweater. The sender of this Christmas gift surprised Lynn. It turned out to be Mrs. Weasley. You know, given how much the Weasley family hates Death Eaters, even if he is a good friend of the Weasley twins, just because of his status as a descendant of Death Eaters, it is destined that he will not be truly recognized by the other party. Not to mention asking Mrs. Weasley to knit a sweater for him, a descendant of a Death Eater. Could it be that there are some factors that I don't know about that made her change her view of me? Lynn looked at the sweater in his hand and thought. Behind the sweater is the shorthand quill given by Erwin Foley. As this, a gift from Arina. Lynn opened the penultimate Christmas gift. This gift looked small and exquisite, and the sender was Arina, whom she had only met 3 times so far. In the package is a crystal ball. Of course, this is not the kind of crystal ball used in divination classes, but the ornamental crystal balls in the Muggle world with patterns such as snowflakes and little people. In addition to the crystal ball, there is also an email inside. Lynna's letter contained her gratitude to Lynn for teaching her how to cast spells without a wand. Soon, Lynn opened the last package, a Christmas gift from his teacher Wallison Green. But after opening the package, what was inside left Lynn stunned. Even Lynn N., who had always been calm, couldn't hold his temper at this moment. I saw 3 pineapple-shaped round things lying quietly inside the package. Grenade. Lynn N. was excited, and with his trembling hands, he took out the envelope pressed under the 3 grenades and opened it. Inside is a personal letter from Teacher Green. I've heard what happened to you on Halloween, and I think it's not very safe to come to Hogwarts Castle, and a pistol doesn't seem to be enough for you to defend yourself, so I sent you some self-defense weapons from the Muggle world. I hope you be able to use it reasonably to protect your own safety. After reading Teacher Green's signature at the bottom of the letter, the corners of Lynn's mouth twitched wildly. Self-defense weapons. You call the MK2 grenade a self-defense weapon? Lynn still has a certain understanding of modern weapons. For example, the 3 pineapple-shaped MK2 grenades in front of him are filled with nitro-starch compound and a certain equivalent of TNT explosives. The killing radius after the explosion is 5 to 10 yards, and counting the ejection distance of its fragments, its killing radius can even reach 50 yards. Different from the spells of wizards, even if the spells are cast by wizards who can cast spells silently and without wands, the light in the flight process will still attract the attention and vigilance of the enemy. But the MK2 grenade does not make any movement during the throwing process, and the faint sound made when the safety pin is pulled out can also be eliminated by magic spells. Therefore, if you encounter an overwhelming enemy, using MK2 grenades to buy yourself time to escape is a great option. Thank you so much, teacher. Lynn N. put away the 3 grenades. As an alchemist, the power of the grenade itself was not enough. He planned to increase its power through the enhanced alchemy circle of the Array Alchemy. It seems that he has been very busy these days. Lynn rubbed the center of his brows. He still planned to let himself relax more during the Christmas holiday. On the other side, the Gryffindor girls' dormitory. Arina is opening her Christmas presents. Since her parents are ordinary people, they cannot use owls to send Christmas presents to Hogwarts Castle. Therefore, she has to go home during the summer vacation to get the Christmas presents from her parents. She was the only one in the dormitory at this time, and the 3 roommates including Hermione had already gone home for Christmas. These 2 unreliable guys, they didn't stay with me at Christmas, they said they went to the world of 2, and let me stay in Hogwarts by myself. Ha, I don't have the fragrant and soft Hermione to accompany me, I'm so sad. Irina's face was filled with resentment. The 3 top Christmas presents were also from the 3 professors, and the contents inside were exactly the same as what Lynn received last year. See, Jourin is not bad, but it's better for him to drink this euphoria by himself. People just have to smile more. After picking up the euphoria from Professor Snape, Irina chuckled. Irina opened another cylindrical Christmas present, which contained a tin of biscuits, and the sender was the Weasley twins. It's from Fred and George, it shouldn't be a problem. Irina looked suspiciously at the biscuit in her hand, but they haven't invented the canary biscuit yet in this timeline. After much deliberation, Irina finally swallowed the biscuit with her eyes closed. Bang! In the next second, a cloud of white air rose slowly, and Irina turned into a cute canary. The canary seemed to be shouting very angrily, and the whole dormitory was full of chirping sounds. Bang! After a minute, the canary cookie failed and Irina returned to her original appearance. Fred and George. Irina gritted her teeth and clenched her fists, determined to give the 2 of them a powerful one. During the time when she became a canary, she finally understood why the canary cookies had appeared so early. Reminiscent of the alchemy topic discussed with the Weasley twins when he met Senior Roll outside the castle, Irina could guess that they had learned alchemy in advance. That Senior Luo, could he be a time traveler like himself? Otherwise, why could he change the process of the Weasley twins learning alchemy? Moreover, he also appeared in the troll incident. Irina thought, but she still couldn't determine the identity of the other party. After all, what if there was indeed such a senior in the original book, and the other party saw Harry and Ron defeating the troll and didn't take action? You must know that everything Irina has done has greatly changed the troll incident, and it is natural that what happens next will be different. At this time, Irina looked at the remaining 3 gifts, which were from Harry, Ron and Hermione. Harry gave her a broomstick model, Ron gave her a wizard chess set, and Hermione gave her a large bag of chocolate frogs. Irina carefully kept the Christmas presents given to her by her friends, and by the way, took out one from the big bag of chocolate frogs and stuffed it into her mouth. In the Gryffindor boys' dormitory, Harry was also trying on his ancestral invisibility cloak. This is a liquid-like, silver-gray garment. It feels like it is woven with water, and it feels very strange to the touch. Unlike the invisibility cloak that Lynn used as an ornament, Harry's ancestral invisibility cloak is an invisibility cloak, one of the legendary 3 Deathly Hallows, which is said to be able to avoid death. Of course, the fact that the invisibility cloak can avoid death may be exaggerated, and its known superiority is that it has permanent invisibility, unlike the invisibility cloaks on the market that have an expiration date. The Christmas dinner can be said to be the most sumptuous banquet of the year at Hogwarts. On the long tables of the 4 colleges, you can see 100 fat roast turkeys, piles of roast meat and boiled potatoes, large plates of delicious small sausages, bowls of peas mixed with butter, and plates and dishes. Thick gravy and delicacies such as lingonberry sauce. Every few steps along the long tables of the 4 major colleges, there will be piles of wizard firecrackers appearing. These firecrackers are very magical. Harry and Fred drew a firecracker together. The firecrackers exploded like a cannon blast, engulfing them all in a puff of blue smoke, from which exploded a rear admiral's hat, and several lively white mice. This kind of colorful firecrackers is like a blind box, which makes Irina feel very interesting. This makes her not eat much at the Christmas dinner, but nearly 100 colorful firecrackers are opened. At the guest of honor table, Professor Dumbledore swapped his pointy wizard hat for a bonnet adorned with flowers, and Professor Flitwick just told him a joke that made him go, ho ho, smiling. Irina and the others watched Hagrid ask for wine 1 cup after another, their faces became more and more red, and finally they kissed Professor McGonagall on the cheek. To the surprise of Irina, Harry and Ron, Professor McGonagall actually giggled, blushed, and tilted her tall black top hat to one side. Hagrid is awesome, Irina screamed in her heart. Harry, Ron and Irina left the table with a whole bunch of things that exploded from the bunker, including all sorts of treats from Honeydukes and little toys like wizard chess. Ron also regretfully thought that his gifts were not given well, because there were a lot of firecrackers in the wizard chess and other color packs. In the middle of the night, Irina sneaked out of the women's bedroom, planning to go to the Hogwarts kitchen to ask the house elves of Hogwarts Castle for some food as usual. At the previous Christmas dinner, she was busy making lottery packages and firecrackers, and she wasn't even full. She reached the Gryffindor common room, wand clutched in one hand. It was already late at night, and the Gryffindor lounge was empty at this time, and the surroundings were in darkness. Those who were not brave enough would not dare to wander here alone. But just as Irina was about to walk out of the Gryffindor common room, she felt someone tap her shoulder. What the hell, what a ghost! After discovering that there was nothing behind her, Irina was so frightened that she backed away repeatedly. At the same time, she raised her hand towards her original position and fired several freezing spells. The icy blue beam of light flashed past, as if it hit something. Immediately afterwards, the invisibility cloak slipped away like running water, revealing the boy who was frozen into an ice sculpture inside. Harry. Irina was stunned for a moment, and she quickly lifted the curse on the other party. The thought Harry was trembling all over, and while putting on his invisibility cloak again, he complained, "Irina, you don't have to be so sensitive. Where did the ghost come from in the Gryffindor common room? Let alone there are ghosts here, but I don't think you're afraid of them." Irina snorted. "Who told you to scare me? You deserve to be frozen into an ice sculpture." Harry said helplessly, "This invisibility cloak is my father's relic. I just wanted to try its effect, and then I saw you here, so I wanted to ask you if you want to go out for a night tour together." Irina spread her hands. "With my magical strength, even if I don't wear an invisibility cloak, I won't be spotted by Filch. However, if you wear an invisibility cloak, can you go to the restricted section of the library without being noticed?" Although Irina was able to use all kinds of magic to hide her figure, but she didn't know the disillusionment curse yet, so naturally she couldn't pass Mrs. Pants's strict guard to enter the restricted area. Harry nodded and said, "Of course, you didn't notice me just now." Hearing this, Irina's eyes lit up. She said to Harry, "Harry, you can try to go to the restricted area. I heard that there are many powerful magic records in the books there, which can allow you to use it to defeat Malfoy." According to the original records, after Harry was discovered in the restricted area, he ran all the way to find the abandoned classroom with the Mirror of Erised. Although the Mirror of Erised cannot change the reality, what is Irina's inner wish? What? She still has some interest. As long as she could lure Harry into the restricted area, and then get Harry kicked out, then as long as she followed Harry, there was a high probability that she would be able to find that classroom. Hearing Irina's words, Harry was also a little surprised. You know, the duel with Malfoy was beaten by Malfoy all over the place, and the fact that Hermione had to save the field in the end made Harry very upset. He naturally hoped that he could defeat Malfoy with his own magic spell. "Blessed. I'll go with you, but I have to leave it to you to find the book." "I'll just hide in the invisibility cloak," Irina said to Harry. Although Harry was a little puzzled, he agreed without hesitation. Harry's invisibility cloak was worn by adults, and to them it was equivalent to a huge cloak. Even if Harry and Irina were both hiding in the invisibility cloak, they could still walk side by side at a distance of half a meter. In this way, Irina successfully encouraged Harry into the restricted section of the library. What happened later was not too different from the original book. When Harry was flipping through a book in the restricted section, the book suddenly let out a sharp, creepy scream, which completely broke the silence of the library. This made Harry hide in the invisibility cloak and drag Irina to run. Irina didn't care where Harry ran, she followed. Soon, Harry and Irina hide in an abandoned classroom. This is an abandoned classroom. Many desks and chairs are piled up against the wall, presenting a large group of dark shadows, and there is also an upside-down wastebasket, but facing Harry and Irina on the other wall, there is something that doesn't seem to belong here, as if someone put it here temporarily because there is no place to put it. It was a very imposing mirror, reaching as high as the ceiling, in an ornate gold frame, and supported by two claw-shaped feet. On the top of the mirror is engraved a line, Oris, Stella, Uru, 8 Ubi, Kafru, 8 on, Vorhas. Read this line backwards, it means, what I show is not your face, but your desire. After seeing this line of words, Irina understood that this was the mirror of Erised. At this moment, Harry took a few steps forward and looked at the mirror of Erised. After seeing what appeared in the mirror of Erised, he was taken aback, and he quickly covered his mouth with his hands so as not to let himself scream out. In the mirror of Erised in front of Harry, there were at least a dozen people standing behind him, but when Harry suddenly turned his head, he found no one except Irina, who had an innocent face. Could it be that these people are all wearing invisibility cloaks, and the function of this mirror is to break the invisibility? Thinking so, Harry looked carefully at the scene in the mirror, and he saw a woman standing behind him smiling and waving at him. This is a very beautiful woman with dark red hair and green eyes exactly like Harry. Beside her, there is a tall and thin man with black hair holding her in his arms. The man wears glasses, with disheveled hair, and a dull hair like Harry's on the back of his head. Are they their parents? This crazy idea appeared in Harry's mind, but seeing the couple who had many things in common with him in the mirror, Harry firmly believed that his point of view was correct. "Mommy," Harry whispered. "Daddy." The people in the mirror were looking at him with a smile, and those in the mirror were all his family members. Just as Harry was immersed in the scene presented by the mirror of Erised, Irina patted Harry on the shoulder and woke him up. "Did you see the words on this mirror? Turn it upside down. Read it." Harry looked at her in confusion and did as he was told. "What I show is not your face, but your desire." After speaking, Harry seemed to realize something. He looked at Irina and asked, "So, the appearance of my parents in this mirror does not mean that they are still alive, but because the deepest desire in my heart is to live with my parents?" Harry said, feeling extremely disappointed in his heart. He thought he could get his parents back and never have to go back to the Dursleys again. Although Irina couldn't see what Harry saw in the mirror, she still nodded and said, "Yes, if I guessed correctly, this mirror is called the mirror of Erised, and it can reflect the most desired thing in the human heart." Harry turned his attention to the mirror of Erised again. In the mirror of Erised, the Potter family were all smiling and waving to him. Harry stared at them hungrily, pressing his hands tightly on the mirror, as if he wanted to let yourself enter this mirror world. Harry didn't know how long he stayed in front of the mirror of Erised, and Irina didn't bother him either, because she knew the pain in his heart at the moment. He didn't come back to his senses until there was some noise in the distance. "Irina, would you like to take a look at this mirror of Erised?" Harry asked. Irina nodded happily, and she stepped forward and stood in Harry's previous position. When Irina looked at the mirror of Erised, she also covered her mouth with her hands and her eyes became moist. "What I saw in the mirror of Erised was a warm room. A tall girl was lying comfortably on a soft and warm sofa, with a cute snow-white cat in her arms beside her. There were 3 or 4 kittens sleeping soundly on her knees. Not far away, a couple was discussing her college life. This is her past life." Irina was a little sad. Sure enough, what she longed for most was to return to the previous world. Unlike the open-minded Lin, she has a softer heart and finds it difficult to let go of everything she once had. Although she does not regret saving those poor animals, it still makes her feel sad to leave her former relatives and living environment forever. "Irina, it's time for us to go back." Seeing Irina standing speechless in front of the mirror of Erised for a long time, Harry couldn't help but remind her. "Well," Irina wiped the corners of her eyes gently, "let's go back." The next night, Harry called Ron and planned to go to the abandoned classroom again. However, when Harry planned to call Irina, Irina declined. In Irina's view, since the past cannot be restored, it is better to face a new life actively. Although she did feel very sad last night and even cried sadly after returning to the dormitory, yesterday's sadness was let go. Let time disappear together. In the abandoned classroom, Harry saw his family again, and Ron saw himself in the mirror as the president of the Boy Student Union and the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. He was wearing a prefect badge and holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup. But after learning that the mirror of Erised only showed people's deepest desires, Ron felt a little disappointed and was unwilling to come with Harry on the 3rd day. Late at night on the 3rd day, Harry's figure appeared again in this abandoned classroom. He seemed to be familiar with the road and walked very fast. He missed his loved ones in the mirror so much that he didn't notice the loud noises on the way he came. Harry plopped down on the floor in front of the mirror of Erised, where he planned to stay all night, with his family and not going anywhere. But at this moment, a voice came and Harry froze in place. "So, you're here again, Harry." Harry suddenly felt that his internal organs were frozen. This feeling was more terrifying than being frozen by Irina's freezing spell. Harry turned around and saw that sitting at a table not far away from the wall was none other than Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts. Harry was in such a hurry that he didn't even notice Professor Dumbledore beside him when he walked into the classroom. I didn't see you, sir," Harry explained hastily. "It's strange that you have become myopic after becoming invisible," Professor Dumbledore said with a smile, and Harry couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw a smile on his face. "So," said Professor Dumbledore, sliding off the table and joining Harry on the floor, "you, like hundreds of others before you, have discovered the joys of the Mirror of Erised, but I assume you know its magic by now." Harry nodded honestly. "Yes, it allows me to see my family." Professor Dumbledore lowered his head and blinked the blue eyes behind his half-moon glasses. "It also made your friend Ron see himself becoming the president of the student union." "How do you know?" Harry exclaimed. "I don't have to use the invisibility cloak to be invisible," Dumbledore said gently. "Well, can you think about what the Mirror of Erised made us all see? Even first-year Lynn can cast the disillusionment curse, let alone Dumbledore, who is a devil-level wizard. The silent and wandless casting of the disappearance curse is easy for Dumbledore." Harry said. "Arina told me that the Mirror of Erised shows my inner desires." Hearing this, Professor Dumbledore was stunned. He only discovered Harry coming here the next day. He didn't know what happened in this classroom on the first day. "In that case, why do you still?" Professor Dumbledore was a little confused. Now that he understood that everything like this was illusory, why would Harry still be addicted to it? Harry smiled bitterly. "But even so, it allows me to see family members I have never met." Professor Dumbledore understood. However, Professor Dumbledore looked solemn and said to Harry, "However, the Mirror of Erised can neither teach us knowledge nor tell us the truth. People waste their time in front of it and do what they can. They are obsessed with what they see, even driven crazy, because they don't know whether what they see in the mirror is real or possible. I'm glad you realize the true nature of the Mirror of Erised, but I won't let you continue to use it. The Mirror of Erised will be moved to a new location tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to go there again. Look for it. If you happen to see it again one day, you must be mentally prepared. Indulging in illusory dreams and forgetting real life is useless. I think your friend Arina should understand this, a little," Professor Dumbledore said. Harry was a little unconvinced, but he also understood that what Professor Dumbledore said was correct. He could only nod with disappointment to express his understanding. Professor Dumbledore smiled and said, "In that case, why don't you put on that wonderful invisibility cloak and go back to sleep?" After watching Harry leave, Professor Dumbledore turned his attention to the empty chair not far away. Professor Dumbledore said softly, "Since you are here, why don't you come out and meet Mr. Rowe?" As the words fell, a figure suddenly appeared on the old chair. Lynn lifted the disillusionment curse and looked at Professor Dumbledore. "Sorry, Professor, I think I still need the Mirror of Erised. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more."